This guy was wrapped up by a giant snake, but with just one hand, he slammed the serpent's head into the ground. Zach had superhuman strength. This guy was seriously badass. But why was this happening? Before this, he was just chopping wood in the forest. It was a simple life, just him and his axe among the trees. When he was heading back to his family's camp, a strange portal suddenly transported him. The system said he was now in the multiverse. Zach had no idea what was going on. A red screen warned him that a herald was occupying the exact same space as him. And right then, a gigantic beast appeared right in front of him. The screen informed him that the power difference between them was 100,000. In other words, he was screwed. The system then explained the rule. Whoever rolled the lower number would be eradicated, and the number started spinning like a freaking casino. Meanwhile, Zach was beating the crap out of the beast. Apparently, the system likes watching people get punched, huh? His number stopped at 96, while the creature's number was still spinning. He started thinking about his family, believing he would never make it home. He grabbed his axe, ready to end it all in one shot. That's when the beast rolled a 91 and was brutally eradicated right in front of him. Zach had survived by just 3 points. When he woke up, he was in the middle of a monstrous forest. The trees were 10 times bigger than the ones in the normal world. Everything was gigantic here, including the monsters. A giant dog came charging at him, while Zach simply swung his axe. Even after getting injured, he sent the beast flying, but it only took a second for everything to go wrong. He ran toward the trailer while the mutant attacked with its dark claws. Zach kept running for his life. The moment he stopped, that beast would catch him. But when he finally got fed up, he decided it was time to show the beast who was boss. He challenged the creature to a one-on-one fight. The mutant charged at him, and Zach started chopping it with his axe. He chopped and chopped, just like he was cutting firewood back in the forest. But in this world, he had to be cold and brutal, because anyone who went soft wasn't going to survive. And now he was standing there, completely covered in the beast's blood. I'm still waiting for a girl to show up. We just gotta be patient. Lying in the middle of the vegetation, a young man slowly opens his eyes. Right above him, 2 suns shine brightly in the sky between the trees. As he sits up, he rests his hand on his head and complains of a severe pain. Next, the young man looks at his own hand and panics upon seeing it covered in blood. Still confused by the scene, he wonders what time it could be. With that, the young man grabs his phone and sees that the screen reads 8:47. Looking at the date on the screen, his eyes widen in a mix of surprise and confusion. He then realizes, astonished, that he has been asleep for 3 whole days. Back at the camp, the young man wonders where everyone went, since they vanished without taking any of their belongings. As he bandages his arm, he realistically concludes that if they haven't returned by now, they probably never will. As he walks outside, the young man questions what is happening and how his body was already able to heal itself. Leaning against a tree, he looks at his own hand and thinks that after everything he went through, he should already be dead. Despite that, he takes a deep breath and realizes that against all odds, he is still alive. With that, the young man comes to realize he is alone in the forest without any phone signal. To make matters worse, he remembers that his car battery has also died. Without thinking twice, the young man prepares to face whatever comes his way. After all, he remembers that to top it all off, there is also a monster nearby. Facing the forest, the young man tries to understand what that creature was and wonders if aliens could be invading Earth. With that, he fears for the rest of the planet and remembers his father. Right after, the memory of Kenzie also comes to his mind. With a determined look, the young man decides he needs to get back home no matter what. So, he begins to climb the dirt wall to get out of there. To support himself, the young man holds onto his axe tightly. Shortly after, he digs the tool into the wall to pull himself up. Upon reaching the top, the young man is stunned by the view before him. Standing tall, he observes the landscape and wonders if there is still a home left to return to. The young man then notices an endless ocean and questions if he happens to be on an island. With a stern face, he curses the situation and asks what they have done to his world. In a shout, the young man blames the system for everything that is happening. At that exact moment, an electronic chime echoes and a screen appears. A series of system notifications pop up, revealing various titles and bonuses he has acquired. Facing one last notification for reaching level 10, the young man questions what is going on. Looking at the screen in front of him, he tries to make sense of what that is. Soon, the window reveals itself to be his own status sheet, showing his name, Zachary Atwood, his level, and all his attributes. Impressed by what he sees, Zachary wonders if the world has somehow turned into a video game. Analyzing the screen, he notices that his high level came from a dice roll, and that most of his attributes come from titles. Next, the young man sees that the system also includes levels, attributes, and even active quests to be completed. Looking at the red beam of light on the horizon, he assumes that must be the incursion mentioned in one of the quests. Right after, he receives a prompt to create an outpost, and wonders if that would be some kind of base. Facing the destroyed campsite, the young man thinks it would be good to have a safe place to call home, especially in that forest. With that, he makes up his mind and confirms to the system that he wants to create the outpost. At that instant, the command screen vanishes into thin air. Upon receiving the notification that the outpost was successfully created, he wonders if that was all there was to it. Suddenly, a small floating creature appears and asks what he is doing there. In a quick movement, the young man leaps and prepares to strike the creature with his axe. Facing the creature, the young man is caught off guard and tries to understand what it is. Taking a step back, he realizes that thing is definitely not human. In response, the small floating being says it is also disappointed by who he turned out to be. Startled, the young man loses his balance and misses his strike with the axe. In an instant, a snake tail grabs him by the arm. Terrified, he barely has time to react to the unexpected situation. While trying to catch his balance, the young man regrets that just because he lowered his guard for a second, this happened. Right after, the creature's body coils around him and traps him completely. At that exact moment, a giant snake emerges and glares at him, ready to strike. Even if everything feels like a game, he understands he cannot afford to lower his guard. With that, he concludes that he will need to take risks if he wants to get stronger. Without hesitation, the young man lets go of the snake's body with one hand. In a quick motion, he grabs the creature's head with force. As he crushes it, the young man screams that he refuses to die there. With the impact, the snake's body is thrown and destroys a tree as it falls. Still holding the creature, he slams it violently against the tree, which splits from the impact. Then, the snake's body uncoils and falls lifeless to the ground. With a stern face, the young man understands that the system rewards hunters and killers. Looking at the scene, he realizes that power is the only thing that matters in this world to survive. With that in mind, the young man decides he needs to become the strongest of them all. Watching from a distance, the small creature laments, thinking he wouldn't stand a chance starting in a place like that. As it floats, it thinks that an outpost would have helped, but wonders why he would choose a tree as a base. The being then reflects that out of all the races it has ever helped, humans were always average, but a treehouse would be the dumbest idea ever. Suddenly, the sound of an axe chopping interrupts it and leaves it confused. The blade, now covered in blood, repeatedly hacks through the snake's body. The small creature watches, bewildered, as the young man dismembers the carcass on the ground. Unable to believe what it is seeing, it stands there in total shock. After the slaughter, the young man takes a deep breath, exhausted but standing tall. He then turns around and glares at the floating being, still surrounded by the remains of the snake. Bloody axe in hand, the young man prepares to attack his next target. Seeing the scene, the small creature admits that the young man might have some merit, and that perhaps it was wrong in its judgment. Still suspicious, he just glares at it in silence without lowering his guard. The floating being then introduces itself as Veth Abarak, but says he can call her Abby, and explains she was sent to help him with the outpost. While introducing himself as Zach, he asks how she can speak without a mouth and what she means by helping. At that, Abby complains that he is yet another one who didn't pay attention to the tutorial fairies and confirms she is the assistant assigned to his outpost. The young man then retorts that the system never sent him to a tutorial and left him alone in that forest 3 days ago. Hearing this, the other being realizes he truly didn't go through the initial process. Next, she is shocked to learn that the world was integrated just 3 days ago and not months ago, but Zach confirms the information. After processing what she heard, the small creature seems excited about the situation. Abby then celebrates being assigned to a challenger, but the young man doesn't understand what she is talking about. Seeing his confusion, she decides some explanations are necessary and reveals that his world has just been integrated into the multiverse. The creature continues, explaining that the multiverse contains countless planets and has existed for billions of years. She tells him that many people were taken to tutorial cities, and hearing this, Zach asks if his family is safe. Soon, Abby explains that some people cannot absorb cosmic energy naturally. Finally, she concludes that a mortal with this deficiency doesn't stand a chance against the system's dangers and ends up dying. Back at the camp, the young man asks what challengers are. With a serious look, he questions if he is also fated to die. Abby answers that a challenger is a mortal who gains power far beyond expectations. She goes on to say that the system leaves them to die, but they are the only ones who defy that fate. The creature then states that his situation is extreme and that, despite receiving a fantastic opportunity, it won't be easy. The young man questions how almost being killed by a dice roll could be an opportunity, but Abby replies that that's how the system sees it. Right after, the assistant reveals that in the grand scheme of the multiverse, the system's voice is one of the few that actually matter. She also warns him that the system hates cowards. With that, Abby makes it clear that if he fails or gives up, he will be punished. Processing the information, the young man understands he will have to complete all the quests and kill the demons. With a narrowed gaze, he wonders if he even has the right to choose. In response, the creature warns that he is on the front lines and that the system is watching him. The small assistant just stares at him in silence for a moment. Shortly after, she suggests he try to complete the quests in 1 month instead of 3. Before she could finish her sentence, the young man squeezes her tightly. Faced with the threat, the small creature vanishes in a flash of light, and the young man is startled to realize she is gone. Soon, a system notification informs that the outpost administrator was recalled early. Failing to understand, the young man just stares at the situation and curses inwardly. With that, he remembers he only has 1 month to complete the quests. Meanwhile, in a grand hall, a demon watches the party from a balcony. Leaning on the railing, he holds a glass of wine with a discontented expression. Approaching him, a woman comments that he doesn't seem very happy. She then says he should smile, since today is a day of celebration. But he asks what there is to celebrate. The woman then reveals that his grandfather, Okrul, named him General of the Incursion, an honor anyone in the clan would dream of obtaining. While they talk, other demon nobles observe them from afar. With a stern face, the man says, "That is an honor they would kill to get." The other demon, with white hair and armor, just stares at him in silence. As she steps away, Aaliyah suggests he will have to fight instead of spending time in brothels, but the other replies that she should know him better. While walking down the stairs, he states he won't fight since this is their game, and that he prefers to let the fools believe they are in control. At that exact moment, one of the guests chokes on his drink, his face contorting in agony. Unable to hold himself up, the blonde demon falls to the ground, writhing in front of the other guests. Seeing him like that, one of the female guests screams desperately for help and asks who was responsible. While watching it all, the other young man merely reflects that they will hang themselves with the very ropes they believe they control. In a tranquil stream, the water flows gently between the trees. Nearby, a small bluish creature flies toward the river. At the water's edge, a massive monster takes the opportunity to hydrate. The creature drinks from the stream, oblivious to its surroundings. Suddenly, the small flying being approaches the monster. Without hesitation, it lands right on the giant creature's snout. Then, the little being moves onto the other's back. At this, the monster's ear twitches, already annoyed by the presence. Irritated, it turns around to see what was bothering it. As it turns, the creature finds the young man right behind it. Wasting no time, the youth strikes the monster with a devastating blow. With the victory, he earns the title Demon Slayer, levels up, and receives 100 coins. Beside the creature's body, Zach comments that he finally made it. Checking the system, he realizes leveling up isn't easy, but he gets points to distribute. He then sees he hasn't used the points he got at the start, and wonders when would be the best time to apply them. He reflects that the fight against the snake taught him he can't be naive and must maintain his edge. Because of that, the young man decides to boost the attributes he knows will help him right now. Without thinking about the future, he allocates all his points, knowing there might not be a later. Meanwhile, various creatures fly through the forest, fleeing from the strange red beam of light in the sky. Lying on a log, the youth sighs and wonders if what Abby said was possible, since there are only 25 days left until his first month ends. He then recalls the warning she gave him about completing the quests early. With that, he understands there must have been a good reason for her to say that, and a reason why the system punished her. Sitting beside the monster's carcass, he concludes that he'll either get a special reward for finishing early, or his life will become much harder once the first month passes. As he washes his hands, the young man remembers he has this opportunity, while others are still trapped in the tutorial. Given this, he decides he can't waste it under any circumstances. Right after, he begins chopping the creature's carcass with his axe. Axe on his shoulder, he reaffirms his decision and prepares for whatever comes next. As he walks away, he tells himself it's time to get back to work. When night falls, the youth rests at his camp around a campfire. For dinner, he roasts a piece of meat over the fire. As he analyzes his titles on the system screen, he notices most of them are related to being the first to do something. The first one, for instance, he earned for being the first person in the world to kill a monster. Another of his titles was for being the first to kill an incursion general alone. In addition, he also received a bonus for killing an enemy 50 levels higher than him. While eating, he remembers that, curiously, he got nothing when he created his outpost. With that, the young man assumes there might be others like him, not in the tutorial, who built an outpost before. The youth then reflects that if a simple snake could become so strong so quickly, there's no telling how strong other people might already be at this very moment. With that in mind, he believes there must be something in the outpost shop that can make him stronger or help him find his family. Browsing through the shop, he notices everything costs coins and remembers he earned some from killing the snake and the other monsters. Suddenly, one of the options on the screen catches his attention. Unable to believe his eyes, he wonders if that could really be a teleporter. He swallows his food quickly, eyes glued to the screen. With a smile on his face, he wonders if he could use it to bring his family to him, or take himself to them. However, seeing the price tag of 10 million coins, all his excitement vanishes. With the weight of that number on his mind, he realizes it's far more than he could ever get just by hunting monsters. Analyzing the system screen, he concludes there's no way to get that many coins just killing demon dogs, but he remembers the quest. Seeing that the shop structures offer benefits, he decides he needs to try and get a powerful one from the start to keep his advantage. With that, the young man understands that just like attribute points, he can't simply hoard coins. While eating, he concludes he needs to spend them on things that can help him right now, and there were only two things he could afford. The first was a skill that, for 3,000 coins, would give him basic info on creatures and how to kill them. Upon activating the new skill, his eye glows and he feels power course through his body. Despite the strain, he remembers the second item he could buy, a gathering array set. Despite the complex name, the item consisted of a rod and a necklace that gathered cosmic energy and transferred it to the user. With the new gear, he could absorb energy equivalent to one demon dog every 24 hours, even while sleeping. Suddenly, he stands up and says it's taking too long and that he's going out to kill a few things. From that moment on, the young man decides to spend almost all his time hunting. This way, whenever he managed to ambush the demon dogs, he defeated them easily with a single strike. However, when he failed to catch them off guard, the fight was much harder and the outcome wasn't as great. With every encounter, the young man learned more, analyzing even the fresh tracks he found. He learned to swing his axe properly to maximize damage. Furthermore, he also discovered the best way to block the creature's attacks. Over time, he began using his new skill to identify monsters and understand their patterns. Activating the Eye of Discernment, he discovers the creatures are called barghests. To survive, he set up several supply caches across the island in case he couldn't make it back to camp. Every day, the youth hunted relentlessly to gather resources. He fought every creature that crossed his path. Many times, he bled and got injured in combat. Over time, the young man killed dozens, perhaps hundreds of monsters, and though leveling up got harder, his power only grew. He continued until he no longer saw them as predators, but as his prey. After reaching level 23, he realizes he needs to pick up the pace. After all, there are now less than 5 days left until the end of the month. In a dark hall, someone approaches the table where Ogres is sitting. Soon, an armored knight stops at the doorway and calls out the demon's name. With a smirk, Ogres greets him as Rydell and asks how the preparations for the incursion are coming along. Bluntly, the other replies that he would know the answer if he had bothered to read the reports. Dismissively, the demon counters that a leader's job is to delegate and invites him to sit, noting he looks tense. Seeing that he prefers to stand, the knight asks if he happens to be drunk. The other then steps closer and sniffs the air to confirm his suspicion. With a grumble, Ogres complains that everyone keeps asking him that and there's not much to do, since their part in the incursion only starts in weeks. At that response, the knight agrees with a sneer. Then, he slides a document across the table and tells the other to sign it so he can get back to his wine. When questioned, Rydell explains the document appoints his cousin Keverin as head scout, and the other signs without hesitation. With a victorious smile, the knight thanks him and assures him the orders will be carried out swiftly. As the other leaves, Ogres comments that he knows he can always count on him. As soon as the door closes, he is left alone in the room again. With a sly grin, the demon thinks that in just a few weeks, he'll finally be free from that lair. Back on the hunt, the young man moves silently through the forest. Carefully, he touches the ground and advances without making a sound. Right after, the youth hides behind a bush to watch his prey. He watches a demon dog sniffing the air, but believes he's safe downwind. Crouched with his axe, he's certain the creature hasn't noticed him yet. Suddenly, the monster turns in his direction, as if it heard something. Startled, the youth can't understand how that was possible. In a flash, the creature lunges forward and attacks something that was hidden. Lying on the ground, he watches the scene, breathless and stunned. Soon the monster reveals 2 extra heads and devours the small hidden creature. With a bloody mouth, the 3-headed beast sniffs the air. Then, it finishes eating its prey without leaving a trace. Satisfied, the monster lets out a roar that echoes through the forest. With one last look, the creature prepares to leave. Quickly, it turns and disappears into the brush. Running through the forest, the young man wonders what kind of creature he had just seen. He then remembers the quest and realizes that giant-clawed monster was one of the heralds he needed to kill. With that, the youth decides he needs to get back to camp, because the only way to kill that thing would be with a plan. However, as he approaches his camp, he realizes something isn't right. There, he finds 2 demonic creatures near his campfire, and is shocked to hear one of them speak. Hidden behind a tree, the young man tries to make sense of what's happening. He watches the smaller creature offer a piece of meat to the other, and notices it seems far more intelligent. With that, he wonders if the creature was sent to find him and reveal his outpost's location to others. To find out more, the youth decides to use his skill to gather information. His skill then reveals the creatures are an imp and a gwilgi, both from the Azerial clan. Instantly, he panics as he realizes the imp sensed his skill being used. Without hesitating, the small creature turns and launches a sphere of energy straight at him. In a swift motion, the young man charges forward and manages to intercept the attack with a punch. Reeling from the blast, the young man curses the agonizing pain. With no time to lose, he uses his axe to deflect the remaining energy. The strike dispels the blast, but he remains on high alert. With a grim expression, he readies himself for the next move. In a flash, he charges straight toward his enemies. However, the gwilgi leaps over him, pinning him with its tail. It then slams him violently against the ground. Without hesitation, the beast bites down on the axe handle, trapping it. With a shout, the young man kicks it away and breaks free. Snuffing out the flames on his arm, he wonders what kind of fire that was. Glancing at his shoulder, he realizes the flames barely touched him, yet it feels as though his very soul has been scorched. Watching the scene unfold, the imp smirks and hurls a taunting remark. With a swift snap of its jaws, the gwilgi bites the axe and snaps it in 2. Staring down both foes, the youth realizes he won't deserve his luck if he fails to win. Determined, a fierce grin grows on his face as he braces for battle. Without hesitation, he charges straight at the red creature. At the same time, the imp fires an energy projectile to stop him in his tracks. Nimble and quick, the young man weaves through a barrage of energy blasts. Capitalizing on the distraction, the gwilgi pounces to strike. Moving fast, he catches the beast in midair. Before he can react, the monster bites down hard on his arm. Fighting through the pain, he roars and prepares to counterattack. Using the momentum, he spins in midair and slams the creature into the ground. He then rains down a relentless flurry of punches on the monster. Refusing to give it a moment to recover, he presses the assault. With one final strike, he crushes the beast's skull against the earth. Victorious, the young man stands up and looks down at the fallen creature. From a distance, the imp watches out of breath, a wide grin on its face. Suddenly, a burst of energy strikes the youth head-on, making him cry out in pain. The blast leaves his arm limp as energy crackles around his hand. As the power consumes him, he realizes that everything up to this point was pure luck. In an instant, he presses his hand against his chest, unleashing a wave of power. He reflects that, in the end, everything he achieved was just good fortune. Rising to his feet, he uses the dead beast's tail to drain the energy from its body. With a quick flick, the tail whips through the air. He then realizes that what he's absorbing is cosmic energy, the fundamental building block of the multiverse. Ever since the system arrived and he died for the first time, this energy has been within him. While the gathering item taught him to sense it, and the skill taught him to use it, mastering it was up to him. His body glowing bright, he absorbs every last bit of the creature's energy. Despite the excruciating pain, he focuses to control his newly awakened power. Gripping the tail, he tells the imp that it shouldn't have broken his axe. Seeing this, the little creature frantically asks him what he thinks he's doing. Terrified, the tiny monster lets out a high-pitched shriek of desperation. In a panic, it unleashes a barrage of energy spheres to stop him. Planting his feet firmly, the young man prepares for the final strike. He swings the dead beast's tail like a whip through the air. With a single sweep, he deflects all the energy spheres at once. The massive collision triggers a devastating explosion. Stunned, the imp can barely comprehend the power of the counterattack. In an instant, the blast consumes everything in sight. On the 30th and final day of the first month, the campsite appears peaceful. Nearby, the creatures' bodies are thrown into the water, sinking to the bottom. Back on dry land, the remains of the monsters float lifelessly. The river waters ripple under the weight of the fallen corpses. Sitting down, the young man carves a new handle for his broken axe. Finishing his work, he raises the new handle and inspects it closely. He regrets failing to reach level 25 and unlock a class, but remembers Abby's advice. Despite falling short of his goal, he knows there's no reason to slow down now. Finally, he reflects that since the system rewards risk, he's ready to take another one. Gearing up, the young man declares himself ready, saying it's time to kill a second herald. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a demon with dark fingernails rests his hand on a table. Beside him, an armored knight prepares for what lies ahead. With a smirk, the demon turns and remarks that it has been quite an eventful month. He asks Rydell if he agrees, but the knight replies that it was only eventful for some of them. The knight then states that this is just the beginning, as the real work starts once the portal forms. Gazing upon the gathering army, he remarks that the task ahead will be thrilling. Fixing his gaze on the crowd, Rydell can barely contain his excitement. Determined, the young man charges forward with axe in hand to face his enemy. In front of the monster, he dodges an attack and readies a counter. However, the herald is too fast and manages to dodge his strike. With a quick slide, the young man backs off to gain some distance. Though out of breath, he glares at the monster, refusing to give up the fight. The creature then stares right back, revealing its name and level. At that moment, the boy remembers a day he went fishing with his father. A bobber sinks into the water, signaling that a fish has taken the bait. As they fish, his father tells him that every animal has something that makes it special. Suddenly, the boy gets excited and tells his dad he hooked something. The man then pulls the rod hard to reel the fish out of the water. However, he loses the fish and remarks on how slippery they are. With a smile, the father explains that unlike animals, humans use tools and traps. He continues, saying the point is they don't catch things by being stronger or faster. Finally, the man reveals that what makes them special is their ability to figure out how to catch things. 2 hours before the fight, the boy sets a trap, agreeing with what his father taught him. Fortunately, he has a large supply of spears at his disposal. On the battlefield, the monster roars furiously at its opponent. The young man faces the creature and prepares for combat. He then runs away, luring the herald, knowing he can't win with brute force alone. After all, he understands that a single strike from the monster would be enough to kill him. With that in mind, the young man concludes he must make sure the enemy never hits him. While dodging an attack, he focuses to harness his energy. The young man then channels the cosmic energy into his arms. With a bright glow, the energy flows throughout his entire body. He realizes he can channel this energy to different parts of his body, making them stronger and tougher for combat. Seeing the monster charge again, the young man doesn't back down. He taunts it to draw it in, knowing he isn't a cultivator. With a limited pool of energy, the young man knows every single drop has to count. As he lures the creature, he keeps in mind that there is no room for error. With a roar, the herald lunges for the final attack. The young man then focuses for one last push. He channels the energy into his legs for an extra burst of speed. With a powerful leap, he releases all the accumulated energy into the ground. Without hesitation, he lunges at the monster, ready to fight. With a devastating blow, he lands a direct hit on the creature. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a portal opens before a demon army. With firm strides, Ogres walks toward the portal. Approaching his guards, he asks where Rydell is. The guard then informs him that the knight has already crossed through the raid portal. Suddenly, an older demon calls him General. With a nod, the other demon and his guards prepare to follow. However, Okrel stops him, saying they won't be following Rydell. With a sly smirk, the young demon stares down his grandfather. In the forest, a beam of red light cuts through the sky, and the earth begins to shake. As he runs, the young man feels the heavy strain of the energy on his body. He curses the situation, realizing he's overdoing it. Overwhelmed by the excess power, he feels his body slowly tearing apart. Despite the pain, he presses on against the monster, knowing he can't stop just yet. As he runs, he spots the trap right ahead and realizes he's almost there. Behind him, the herald pursues him with a furious roar. Without slowing down, the young man keeps sprinting toward his target. With a determined look, he pushes himself to maintain his speed. Suddenly, the spear trap appears right in his path. The herald rushes straight toward the spears, oblivious to the danger. In an instant, the young man stops and prepares his next move. With a swift spin, he releases a blast of energy onto the ground. Using the momentum, he leaps high over the trap and the monster. Furious, the herald snarls and tries to stop, but it's already too late. The creature falls right into the trap and is impaled by the sharp spears. With wide eyes, the monster watches death approach. Exhausted, the young man wonders if his trap worked as intended. The spears pierce the creature's body, pinning it in place. Even wounded, the herald thrashes and snarls in pain. Suddenly, an orb of energy begins to form inside its mouth. With the monster defeated, the young man levels up, reaching level 25 and completing the quest. With his hand glowing, he takes pride and mutters to himself that he pulled it off. Laughing, he celebrates the achievement and shouts that he made it. In a burst of euphoria, he points to the sky and yells that he killed another one of them. Suddenly, a roar echoes through the forest, taking him by surprise. From the shadows, a pair of red eyes glares at him with pure hatred. Terrified, the young man curses the unexpected turn of events. In an instant, dozens of creatures emerge from the darkness. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a dark tower looms on the horizon. Kneeling and wounded, a soldier begs for his life. Without hesitation, the demon executes the soldier with a single strike. Sword still in hand, he looks down at the man's fallen body. All around, other soldiers lie dead on the ground as well. One of the knights then asks how much longer they'll have to wear those disguises. Ogres replies that they will stay disguised until he says otherwise. Sprawled on the ground, one of the demons wonders if he's actually serious. Seeing the scene, Alea asks if the order applies to her as well, but Ogres says especially to her. He explains that he doesn't want anyone in the new world knowing about their involvement. Suddenly, one of the knights grabs him by the throat and asks if he's sure that's wise. Black tears stream from the demon's eyes as he loses consciousness. The knight then slams him to the ground and warns him that they will be without his grandfather's protection. Unbothered, Ogres tells him to let it be. Lying on the ground, he reflects that he's sick and tired of his clan and their betrayals. With a hardened look, the young man states that all that's left to do is to find the locals of this new world. As he runs through the forest, the young man is surrounded by monsters on all sides. Gasping for air, he curses his luck, completely blindsided by the situation. He realizes the creatures have him totally surrounded. He wonders why Abby didn't warn him that killing a herald would summon every beast on the island. He notices his cosmic energy is running dangerously low after using it all in the previous fight. With no energy left, he knows running from the horde is impossible. He realizes that if he stops, even for a second, they'll tear him to shreds. Suddenly, one of the monsters leaps at him to strike. With a precise blow, he manages to parry the creature's attack. Even battered and bruised, he keeps fighting for his life. Suddenly, he feels a small surge of energy replenished after killing the Gwilgi. He realizes that if he keeps killing and absorbing energy at the same rate he spends it, he won't have to run from the horde after all. With a grim smile, he decides to make his stand. Without hesitation, he turns around, ready to face the horde head-on. With a deafening roar, the horde lunges forward. Fearless, he leaps into the air and strikes the first monster in sight. Facing the wave of beasts, he knows he has to slaughter them all to survive. Meanwhile, in a desolate wasteland, a towering structure shoots a beam of red light into the sky. Standing around a tactical table, Riddell declares that in Ogras's absence, he is in charge. He orders Keverin to send out scout parties to find out what killed Herald Urkas. With a smirk, the other demon replies that it's already been taken care of. Turning back to the maps, Riddell says they need to upgrade the outpost as fast as possible. Suddenly, a guard shouts that someone is coming through the portal. Confused, the knight draws his sword, getting into a combat stance. A group of battle-ready demons steps out from the portal. The demon leading them glares at Riddell with pure contempt. Stunned, the knight can barely believe his eyes. Back in the forest, the young man rests, utterly exhausted after the brutal battle. Wounded and covered in blood, he leans heavily on his axe to keep from collapsing. Battered, he knows he needs to reach one of his safe houses. As he limps away, he leaves a path paved with monster corpses behind him. Stumbling forward, he spots a familiar tree and leans against it for support. Groaning, he grabs hold of a branch, trying to pull himself up. With one final push, he hauls himself up into the canopy. Exhausted, he slumps against a large branch and finally lets his guard down. Despite his severe injuries, he manages to survive the night. The next morning, he wakes up to the sound of chirping birds. Opening his eyes, he groans, realizing it's already been over a month. He reflects on how, against all odds, the world hasn't ended yet. Then he corrects himself. The world actually ended a month ago. As he changes his bandages, he gets ready to move out. He notices that his body is healing at an incredible rate. Despite the accelerated healing, he knows he's still far from a full recovery. Keeping that in mind, he decides he'll finally select his class once he gets back home. Suddenly, the snap of a twig breaks the silence, making him freeze. With a hardened look, he wonders if he's being followed. Moments later, he spots a demon walking through the woods. Watching from a distance, he tries to make sense of what's happening. Hidden in the bushes, he can hardly believe he's looking at an actual demon. Suddenly, the demon drops to one knee and examines a set of tracks on the ground. The demon curses Ogres in a foreign tongue for leaving him behind. With a smirk, the young man lunges forward and knocks the demon out with a swift strike. After dropping his target, he grabs the enemy's weapon, thanking him for the free loot. Without hesitation, he slings the demon over his shoulder and hauls him away. He ties him securely to a tree stump for interrogation. To wake him up, he splashes a handful of water onto his face. Startled, the demon calls out for his partner, but nobody answers. The young man presses the blade of his axe against the demon's throat, shutting him up instantly. Holding a floating mug of water, he greets the demon, who gasps in shock at the sight of a human. Axe resting on his shoulder, he asks the demon if he understands what he's saying. When the demon stays silent, he demands to know how many of them are invading his world. Using his sword, he cuts the ropes binding the captive, who cries out in pain from the wound. Suddenly, the demon forces himself up, flaring with an overwhelming aura of energy. With a demonic roar, he commands the human to burn to death. Shocked, the young man curses as the sudden turn of events catches him off guard. In an instant, a massive fiery explosion engulfs everything around them. The entire camp is completely wiped out by the blast. Knocked to the ground, he wonders if the demon absorbed a massive amount of energy just to blow himself up. He realizes the demon did it on purpose to prevent any information from leaking. Watching the demon's remains turn to ash, he concludes that these demons are going to be a massive problem. After the explosion, the young man hides in a tree to observe. Seeing that no one showed up, he concludes the area is safe. With a jump, he lands back on the ground and approaches the wreckage. He then laments that the demon blew himself up like that. As he walks, the young man thinks it would have been nice to get some new gear. After all, if he knew the demon was going to explode, he wouldn't have left his belongings with him. Despite the loss, he consoles himself with the fact that he got a new axe. With the new weapon in hand, he mentions that his old axe was on its last legs anyway. On top of that, he's excited to finally reach level 25. With a smile, he prepares to choose his new class. However, he remembers there's one thing he needs to do first. Crouching down, he opens the system interface and selects an item. In an instant, an equipment crate appears right in front of him. Opening the crate, he wonders if this is really what he bought. Wasting no time, he grabs one of the items and rushes to set it up. As he drives the last stake into the ground, he prepares to activate the system. With a smirk, the guy wonders if this thing is actually going to work. Right on cue, a notification confirms the item's activation. A wave of energy spreads through the stakes, enveloping the entire campsite. Within seconds, a dome of energy forms, protecting the whole area. In the blink of an eye, the dome fades, blending seamlessly into the environment. Touching the barrier, the young man is impressed and says it's amazing. He then realizes that with the camouflage, it's like his camp isn't even there. Relieved, he hopes this will keep more demons from tracking him down. With everything set, the guy finally decides it's time to choose his class. The system screen congratulates him on completing the quest and asks if he wants to select a class. With a smile, he accepts the offer without hesitation. However, an error message informs him that he needs a Nexus node to proceed. Annoyed, he curses the system, realizing he'll have to spend all his coins. Despite the cost, he decides to buy the item, hoping it won't give away his location. Right after the purchase, a pillar of light appears, and an item spawns in the middle of the camp. Approaching the item, he wonders what it could be. Using the tip of his axe, he taps the pedestal to test it. Suddenly, the top opens up, revealing a selection screen. The young man stares at the screen, getting ready to make his choice. With a smile, he says the time has finally come. The screen then displays the first class option, a fighter. Next, the second option, an acolyte, is presented. Right after, the marine class also appears among the choices. The fourth option, a demon hunter, pops up on the screen. Finally, the last available class is the woodcutter. Looking over the options, he remarks that they aren't bad at all. He then notices they are all F tier, which must be the starting point for everyone. Realizing this, he knows it's the most important decision he's made in a long time. To start, he decides to eliminate the fighter and acolyte classes since they're too basic. He also considers that while the demon hunter is strong now, it could be a drawback in the future. After all, he doesn't like the idea of only being strong against one type of enemy. He needs to be ready for anything, not just demons. He also rules out the Marine class, as it seems to have the same issues, only worse. He realizes he doesn't want to be restricted to naval combat, which leaves him with just one choice. He then considers that the system rewards the brave, and this rare class must be a prize for risking his life. With a smirk, he says that being limited to axes is actually an advantage. Without hesitation, he grips the crystal with both hands. With a shout, he chooses the woodcutter class and absorbs the crystal's power. A surge of energy rushes through his body as the system confirms his class selection. With the choice made, he earns 3 new titles along with stat bonuses. The energy flows through his whole body, empowering him completely. His body transforms, his muscles hardening with the newly acquired power. All of his stats shoot up significantly all at once. Exhausted, he collapses to the ground but recovers quickly. With a smile, he realizes he was the very first person in the entire world to obtain a class. Checking his status, he's blown away by how much his stats have increased. Looking down at his arm, the young man analyzes the raw strength he just received. He then flexes his muscle to test the power now coursing through his veins. With a satisfied grin, the young man finally understands the true power of a class. Soon, a system window pops up, revealing that his new class skills are locked behind quests. Realizing this, he grips his new axe, knowing he can't just sit around waiting. With a determined look, the guy decides it's time to show those invaders who the real demon is. At that exact moment, the quest window updates, confirming he has already defeated 2 of the 5 main targets. As he looks out at the landscape, one of the demons remarks that the incursion is a wonderful opportunity. Sitting on his throne, he complains about Ogress's tactic of releasing the beasts first. He believes that letting the monsters loose earlier was an act of cowardice. While chopping wood, the demon concludes there is nothing dangerous on that island. He then guesses that Vul and Urkaz probably killed each other as soon as they arrived. Elsewhere, a general complains that these brilliant tactics cost them precious time. Standing before a group of slaves, he reflects that the heavens must have noticed their sacrifice. With a smile, the demon turns to his men and tells them they are truly blessed. Right after, he reports that a few of his scouts have already returned. They found a Nexus crystal vein deep within the island's mountains. Though small, the vein contained an impressive amount of wealth. With a smirk, the demon explains that not all discovered treasure makes its way back to the clan. Suddenly, he snaps his fingers and calls out to one of his men. He then orders Keverin and Gormer to start setting up camp, as he is tired of walking. Upon reaching the top of a hill, he asks Kayla if the spot is good enough. With a smile, one of the demons approaches and lets her know the table is ready. Seeing Kayla express her thanks, he tells her not to be so formal and to just call him Keverin. Sitting down, he comments that he's surprised she had time for this. With a smile, the demon replies that he always has time for what truly matters. Suddenly, he gets annoyed by the bugs and complains that they're going to ruin the meal. He then calls for Gormer and asks him to take care of the insects. However, turning around, he finds no one there and calls for Gormer again. Confused, he stands up to look for his servant, but it's already too late. In a flash, the boy appears and strikes the demon with a fatal blow. Seeing this, the other demons shout that he's a native. They then charge forward, ordering their men to kill him. The young man, in turn, arms himself with one of the enemy's daggers. With a swift motion, he throws the weapon to defend himself. The dagger flies through the air and clashes against an enemy's spear. Agilely, the demon leaps forward and attacks the boy with his sword. Without hesitation, the youth parries, the impact of their blows sending out a wave of energy. Sliding back, the demon blocks the incoming attack with his blade. With a smirk, he realizes the world is full of humans and that he can crush them like bugs. However, the boy grips him tightly, refusing to let him escape. With a grunt, the demon struggles to break free from his grasp. While holding him fast, the youth strikes another approaching demon. Without flinching, he dodges incoming attacks and keeps fighting on. With a powerful punch, he hits one of the enemies dead on, knocking him down. The force of the blow splits the ground, driving the others back. In an instant, he hits a crystal on the ground, using it for leverage. Taken aback, the demon can barely process what is happening. Suddenly, the young man hurls his axe with all his might. As the axe flies, dark energy spreads across the battlefield. With a cry of pain, the demon is struck by the energy, feeling his body burn. At that exact moment, an arrow pierces right through his shoulder. Exhausted and wounded, the youth can barely stay on his feet. Shouting, the demon lunges forward to deliver the final strike. However, the boy reacts just in time to defend himself. With a quick move, he manages to block the enemy's attack. Shocked, the demon wonders how this is possible when the world was initiated only a month ago. Taking advantage of the distraction, the youth reaches out to strike. Swiftly, he grabs the demon's hair and yanks it back with force. Right after, He lands a solid punch straight to his face. With a kick, he launches the enemy's spear into the air. With a grin, the boy readies himself for his next move. He snatches the spear mid-air and uses it to strike. Leaping up, he charges forward, preparing for the finishing blow. Without hesitation, he wipes the blood from his face and glares at his opponent. The two stare each other down from a distance, ready for the next clash. Wounded, the demon stands up and prepares to attack once more. Sword in hand, he praises the boy's strength for a human. With narrowed eyes, the demon says he's heard of people like him before. He calls them trash and outcasts, too weak to cultivate, yet stubbornly persisting anyway. With contempt, he compares them to annoying insects. He then reflects that they fight on until the heavens themselves are forced to acknowledge them. With that, the demon realizes that these people are known as challengers. He acknowledges the boy's potential, but remarks that it's a real shame. Sword raised, he prepares for the final attack. After all, he says, the kid is challenging him now. With a swift movement, Keverin lunges at the boy, who barely manages to dodge the blow. Even so, the force of the attack knocks Zachary to the ground, leaving him at a disadvantage. Before the enemy can retaliate, the boy readies himself and blocks the next strike with his axe. Feeling the impact, Zach vents his frustration upon realizing his charge had no effect. With that, the attack's energy explodes against Keverin's armor, blasting him backward. On the other side, the Scoutmaster mockingly remarks that the blow didn't leave a single scratch on him. Regaining his composure, the boy realizes his opponent's armor redirected his power, knowing it would make the fight much tougher. Right after, the demon surges forward again, shouting for him to die. However, the attack is intercepted by a creature that steps in to protect him, forcing Keverin back from the impact. Irritated, he turns to the creature, demanding to know why it's interfering. Before he can finish his sentence, a sudden strike hits the demon, making him scream in pain. Completely caught off guard, he tries to process what just happened. Right in front of him, Zachary emerges with a new surge of energy in his arm, revealing himself as the attacker. Without hesitation, the boy slams a powerful blow onto the ground, unleashing a wave of force toward his enemies. Seeing this, one of the other demons yells a desperate warning to his commander. Despite the warning, Keverin is blown far back, crashing violently against a rock. Down on the ground, he screams at his subordinate not to lower his guard, but the grunt tries to argue back to no avail. Before their conversation can go any further, Zachary ambushes him from behind with a swift, brutal strike. Startled, the demon spins around, clueless about where the attack came from. The boy immediately seizes the opening to unleash a hit with all his strength. Even though he was taken by surprise, the Scoutmaster manages to block at the very last second. Giving him no time to react, Zach pushes forward and tackles him to the ground with a heavy shove. With that, the two lock into a grueling hand-to-hand struggle for dominance. The boy manages to pin him down, shoving his opponent's face into the dirt with raw force. The demon, however, grabs his wrist, desperately trying to break free from his grip. Even as his face is getting crushed, Keverin barks an order for an ally named Kayla to shoot the boy. Meanwhile, he uses the distraction to discreetly pull out a small dagger. Moments later, the demon plunges the blade straight into Zachary's side without a second thought. As the steel pierces his flesh, the boy cries out in agony and loses his strength. Watching him writhe in pain, Keverin sneers that this is exactly how things were supposed to go. Wounded, the boy still tries to resist, clutching the demon's arm that stabbed him. With his vision blurring, his strength completely fades and he collapses right over his opponent. Standing up, Keverin mockingly asks if that was really all the challenger had to offer. Even on the ground, the boy manages to reach out and grip the handle of his axe. Meanwhile, the Scoutmaster keeps taunting him, calling him nothing more than a bug. Just as he prepares to deliver the final blow, a system notification suddenly pops up. Lying on the dirt, Zachary catches his breath while his axe now sits buried deep in the demon's chest. As he tries to push himself up, the boy groans in pain, feeling an arrow pierce his back. Up ahead, a female archer barks an order for the human not to move. Keeping a safe distance, she keeps her bow trained directly on him. Ignoring her order, the boy shouts as a fresh wave of energy surges into his hand. With that, he glares at his new foe with fierce determination in his eyes. The woman repeats her command, warning him that she won't let him get away after what he did to Keverin. She then vows to make him pay, but the boy simply responds that they'll see about that. In the background, the Scoutmaster's body lies motionless while Zachary rests, completely drained. With the battle over, the boy decides to loot the enemy, thinking it'd be nice to grab some decent gear since the first demon blew himself up. Rummaging through the possessions, he finds a small pouch that feels way heavier than it should be. Curious, he smirks and opens it. stunned by what he finds inside. An absurd amount of items spills out and floats into the air, instantly explaining the weird weight. Sorting through the pile, Zachary finds food and even furniture, wondering if the demon was leading a raid or going on a picnic. Right after, his eyes lock onto a few glowing crystals that seem pretty important. A system window pops up, revealing them to be F-rank Nexus crystals, capable of restoring stamina and helping level up. Holding one in his hand, the boy remarks that it feels like holding a mini sun of cosmic energy. With that, his active quest screen appears, displaying his current objectives and rewards. He then recalls that one of his quests offers these crystals as a reward, and decides to absorb one, even if it's low tier. Half an hour later, the boy finishes recovering and gears up in the armor he acquired. He then straps the spatial bag to his new belt, making sure he won't lose it. With a satisfied smile, Zachary sarcastically thanks the dead demon for the fresh gear. The boy then picks up the enemy sword, only to comment that it's useless to him. Instead, his hand reaches for the axe lying on the ground, making his weapon preference clear. He then destroys the magic pouch, stating he'd rather not let the demon's buddies get their hands on it either. Next, he opens his system interface, noting that he's making solid progress on his quests. Checking the list, he notices that even after a month, the Raid Master quest shows 0 progress, making him wonder if he needs to clear the area first. Looking over his skill set, the boy comes to the conclusion that he still has a long way to go to get stronger. He lets out a sigh, remembering he's already slain 2 heralds, but still has to deal with the imps, an unknown mob type, and the raid general himself. Walking away from the corpses, the youth realizes he has no idea where to find the imps, let alone who the 4th herald is. Stepping deeper into the forest, he realizes that for now he's only got one real choice left. With a resolute look in his eyes, Zachary decides to lock onto his next target, the raid general. Stashing himself in the thick brush, he peers at the enemy base, muttering that it's time to see how they like being invaded for a change. Inside the enemy base, one of the demons screams that their troops outside the gate are being slaughtered, ordering everyone to hurry up. As they run, one soldier asks what is attacking them, but the other replies he has no idea and that they just need to move. With that, a small squad of demons rushes out of the fortress. Upon arriving, the squad leader orders his troops to hold their position before advancing any further. Completely shocked by the scene, he wonders what the hell happened there. Before them, the battlefield is littered with the bodies of their fallen comrades. Hidden in the brush, Zachary catches his breath, realizing he can't force his way to the raid general. He knows he'd be burned and chopped to pieces if he tried to just break down the front gate. He also concludes that sneaking past is impossible since the guards spotted him immediately, and wearing them down would take too long with so many enemies on the island. Watching them from afar, he notices many walking between the outpost and a hive in the mountain, guessing they're up to no good. The young man wonders if they're mining or exploring, but notices most stay at the outpost to build their city. Seeing this, he asks himself what they are doing there, remembering how he initially thought they were just system-generated NPCs. However, he recalls seeing them laugh and gamble, realizing they are living creatures, just like him. Because of this, he starts to question if they actually want to be there, or if they were forced, just like he was. Despite his doubts, his gaze hardens, and he decides it doesn't matter. Watching his enemies, the boy concludes they are invaders on his island, and the only diplomacy they'll get is the blade of his axe. Driven by this resolve, he reminds himself that he can't give up. He still needs to find his family and become what Abby called a challenger. With a focused mind, the boy accepts that if he has to slaughter some demons to reach his goals, then so be it. So he changes his strategy, deciding to find and kill the remaining 2 harbingers first. Right after that, he plans to return and finally take care of the raid general. The search, however, proves far from easy, forcing him to hunt for the harbingers high and low. As he hunted through the forest, his axe mastery grew with every enemy he felled along the way. His journey took him to the edges of the island, where he fought off sea monsters, even into the smallest, most dangerous caves, never stopping the fight. Exhausted, the young man scaled steep cliffs, certain the harbingers had to be somewhere. Finally, he reaches the top of a mountain to get a better view of the area. Catching his breath, the boy shields his eyes from the sun and scans the horizon. From his new vantage point, he realizes he simply wasn't looking in the right places as he spots a distortion in the landscape. Fixing his gaze, the boy finally finds one of his targets. Perched on a tree branch, a creature with a stone body and glowing energy cracks was watching him from a distance. Approaching it, the boy greets the creature and asks what it is, but receives only a grunt in response. With that, he uses his appraisal skill, which identifies the monster as a stone ape from the Ajrezak clan. Finally, the boy concludes with satisfaction that the last two harbingers are an imp and an ape. In response, the stone creature lets out a furious, intimidating roar. Immediately after, the monster leaps from its branch, charging at high speed into battle. Without backing down, Zachary lunges toward the enemy, ready for a head-on clash. With a precise movement, he readies himself to block the attack with his glowing axe. In a single strike, the boy cleaves the stone ape in half, receiving system coins as a reward. After the fight, he assumes these monsters don't leave their territory, which explains why he hadn't found them before. With this new insight, the young man realizes he'll need to venture deeper into the mountains to find the next harbinger. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound catches his attention, making him wonder if it's another stone ape. To his surprise, dozens of other stone monsters emerge from the mountains, rushing straight toward him. Unfazed, he raises his axe and dares the apes to show him what they've got. As the creatures leap to attack, he reflects that ever since the system arrived, his life has been an endless chain of non-stop battles, one after another. While fighting, the boy reflects that at first, he couldn't make sense of anything happening around him. He only wondered where his friends and family were, and what had happened to his world. Over time, he realized that the more he thought about it, and the more he fought without pause, and the more enemies he brought down with his axe, the more things began to make sense to him. Little by little, the very structure of the multiverse became clearer in his mind. Facing the horde of enemies, he saw them as an endless forest, and with his axe in hand, the boy viewed himself as the lumberjack destined to chop them down. Suddenly his surroundings shift, and he finds himself in an unfamiliar place, wondering if this is some kind of vision. As he tries to process it, he spots something in the distance that catches his eye. Before him, a massive army of angelic beings was preparing for war. Moments later, he witnesses a colossal battle between these beings and other creatures of unimaginable power. The boy is awestruck by their level of power, but something cuts his observation short. Abruptly, the vision shifts its focus to a specific point in the middle of the clash. The vision then centers on a bald man holding an axe, leaving the boy wondering where he came from. Then, the mysterious man seems to concentrate all his energy for his next move. With a surge of effort, he raises his axe high above his head, gathering immense power. Right after, he unleashes a downward strike that cleaves through the air with blinding speed. With that, the impact releases a massive shockwave of energy that devastates the entire landscape. Snapping back to reality, the boy seems to absorb the technique and replicates the swing with his own axe. The attack unleashes a wave of energy that completely annihilates the surrounding stone monsters. Next, a system notification informs him that he has acquired a Tao seed as his body erupts with newfound power. As the dust settles, the young man kneels confused amid the destruction, trying to comprehend what just happened. Amidst the wreckage of the stone apes, the young man finally manages to rest for a bit under a tree. Seeing the notification, he remembers having heard of the Tao before, linking it to Eastern mythology or religion. As he raises his axe, the boy questions if this could really be real, admitting he doesn't fully grasp its meaning. Despite his doubts, he feels that somehow he can understand the new power wrapping around his hand. The vision of the mysterious man returns, making him realize he caught a glimpse of a fundamental truth of the multiverse. With that, he understands his own strikes were flawed, and that the man's attack in the vision represented true strength. Back in reality, the young man decides to feel the weight and momentum behind the axe's swing to imbue them into his attack, and so he drags the blade across the ground, channeling the new energy into the blow. With a single movement, he cleaves a massive fissure across the entire battlefield. Even exhausted, he realizes the power of the man in the vision didn't just come from the weight of his strike. Remembering the scene, the youth understands there was something more to that man's attack. It was a power that for now he still couldn't fully comprehend. Staring at the image of the warrior, he wonders if he'll ever be capable of reaching a power like that. Soon, a system notification informs him that he was the third in the world to achieve enlightenment and form a Tao seed. Surprised, the young man processes the fact that he was only the third to accomplish such a feat. With this discovery, he realizes there are others like him scattered across the globe. Reflecting on the end of the tutorial, the young man wonders how many other geniuses might be perfectly suited for cultivation. Frustrated, he thinks that while he's trapped on this island, humanity might already be rebuilding and fighting back. With that, he realizes that since he had always been at the forefront, this was the first time he ever felt surpassed. Checking his stats, Zachary decides he needs to push himself even harder to reach his goals. Surveying the destruction, he concludes that when the dust settles, the strongest will decide the new world order. Suddenly, something catches his attention amid the silence. With a smirk, the boy realizes he was so focused on other things that he almost missed an important detail. As he relaxes, he sees that his other quest is nearly complete, with only a few kills remaining. Meanwhile, in a dark room of a distant castle, a messenger approaches to deliver his report. Hearing the news, Ogres blinks in disbelief, asking what Keverin could have possibly done. The soldier informs him that he's dead, and they suspect it was the same group that took out Vul and Urkaz. With a nervous twitch, the noble concludes that based on their strength and minimal tracks, it must be an elite force of 10 or more warriors. Hearing this, his rival bursts out laughing, celebrating that the fool got killed and that nothing could have turned out better. With a dry cough, Ogres says he's fine, claiming it must just be an allergy to the planet's air. He then orders a squad to check on Cindermane and Hugo, commenting that the natives are clearly stronger than expected. With an evil smile, he declares that all he needs now is for Rydell and the natives to kill each other off, solving all his problems. Watching this, a guard named Ilver warns him to be careful since he's smiling too much, but he just tells him to shut his mouth. Back in the mountains, Zachary practices his swings, getting closer and closer to completing his quest. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he prepares for the final movement. Axe in hand, the young man focuses, knowing he only needs one more. Channeling the new energy, he delivers a powerful final blow, completing the system task. With that, his body is enveloped in an aura of power emanating from his axe. The scene then shifts to a steep, rocky mountain. The boy begins climbing the massive stone wall with determination. Pushing through the effort, he climbs higher and higher, gripping the cracks in the rock. Reaching the top, he looks down at the imp camp below. To draw out his enemies, he draws the attention of a group of stone apes, who turn around in confusion. Enraged, the creatures roar and charge toward their new target. With a focused glare, the young man prepares for the approaching battle. He grips his axe tightly as it begins to glow with accumulated energy. Before him, the horde of stone apes leaps in his direction, ready to strike. His body wrapped in power, the youth prepares to unleash his new technique. In a single whisper, he concentrates all his intent into the next strike. The axe's energy expands, forming an even larger blade of power. With a swift motion, the young man swings, releasing a devastating wave of energy. The attack cuts through the enemies, sweeping every monster from his path. Hanging onto the cliffside, he realizes the mountains were hiding something. He was certain there was more to this place than met the eye. Thus, the youth understands that the higher he climbed, the denser the cosmic energy became. Even the stone apes seemed stronger, patrolling the cliffs as if standing guard. Observing them, he notes they looked more like humanoid demons than the island's other beasts. The young man notices they moved in packs, and many of them had a leader of sorts. It was a larger ape, visibly stronger than the rest, radiating an aura of power. Still, the young man concludes that despite being stronger, they weren't enough to pose a threat to him. He continued his search for days, climbing the surrounding peaks without rest. Despite the effort, the youth found nothing, realizing his hunt for the Harbinger was proving useless. Until, in a quiet moment, a new idea strikes him. Looking down at the valley, he finally understands that the Harbinger wasn't high up in the mountains. Just below, the boy spots a glowing tree and realizes his target was down there the entire time. Without hesitation, he begins scaling down the cliff toward his destination. As he draws closer, a strange sensation washes over the area. Suddenly, the young man stops, sensing something that made no sense. Before him, the tree glowed with mystical energy, leaving him bewildered by the sight. Trying to make sense of what happened there, he spots a solitary figure sitting beneath the tree. Sitting in meditation, the system identifies him as Cindermane, the level 58 stone ape harbinger. Suddenly, the herald snaps his eyes open, revealing immediate killing intent. Without wasting a second, the young man lunges forward with his axe, but the blow is stopped by his enemy's bare hands. With astounding force, the monster's claws clamp around the blade, locking it in place. Even using all his strength, Zachary can't move his weapon a single inch. Meanwhile, Cindermane grips the axe firmly, flexing his physical dominance. All of a sudden, a third eye opens on his forehead, glowing with intense energy. With that, a golden aura of power engulfs the herald's entire body. Seeing this unfold, the boy realizes things just got way more complicated. Immediately after, the monster releases a surge of energy and blasts him away with a single shove. The sheer force drags the youth across the ground as he struggles to regain his footing. As he gathers himself, he respects the herald's power, but notes his own strength has nearly tripled since his fight with Vul. With this new power surging through him, He remembers he now holds a Dao seed, a class, and fresh skills. Even so, Cindermane praises him, stating he's far stronger than Harold Barguest. Setting himself for the next move, Zachary takes a firm step forward. Across from him, his opponent does the same, ready to continue the clash. Without a moment's hesitation, the young man charges at top speed toward the herald, who readies himself. With a flick of his wrist, Cindermane raises an energy barrier to defend against the incoming strike. Right then, a massive rock wall surges from the ground, completely blocking Zachary's path. Undeterred, the youth channels all his strength to shatter the stone formation. In a flash, he bursts right through the barrier, obliterating the crystals with a single axe blow. Smirking with confidence, he keeps pressing forward, ignoring the falling debris. Plunging from above, the boy dives toward his opponent waiting below. In the blink of an eye, the two collide in a high-speed exchange of blows. Spotting an opening, Zach winds up a punch charged with his newfound energy. He strikes Cindermane square in the shoulder, but the beast absorbs the blow without giving ground. Capitalizing on the close range, the young man lands a second punch straight to the monster's face. He then follows up with his axe, carving a deep gash across the herald's chest. Blood spurts everywhere from the wound, staining the trunk of the mystical tree. As the battle rages on, the two warriors trade fierce blows right at the foot of the great tree. In the end, their blood paints the white blossoms of the sacred tree red. Lunging forward once more, the young man rushes his opponent at blistering speed. Closing the distance, he swings, but the nimble herald dodges, staying on the defensive. During the clash, Zachary notices the monster constantly positioning himself between him and the tree. Grinning, he realizes he doesn't need to aim for his opponent. He just needs to fake an attack on the small tree. Letting out a battle cry, the boy charges full force toward the sacred tree. Just as planned, Cindermane leaps in front of the strike, taking the direct hit of the axe on his own body. Seeing this, Zachary celebrates that his plan worked. As the beast was so desperate to protect the tree, he sacrificed himself. With a roar, the herald grabs the axe blade with his hand, stopping the blow through sheer brute force. Awestruck by the sight, the young man acknowledges his rival's sheer determination. In that moment, he realizes the monster knows what he wants and is ready to give everything to protect it. With that, the youth lands a direct punch to the herald's face, saying that in that regard, they're just the same. The blow hits dead on, burning the beast's flesh with the impact of raw energy. In response, Cindermane lets out a deafening roar that echoes across the entire valley. The sound of battle reverberates through the mountains, drawing the attention of everything nearby. Hearing the screech, Zach recalls the normal stone apes made the exact same sound, and decides he needs to finish this now. Before he can react, a powerful blow from the herald hits the young man head-on. The sheer force sends him flying back, crashing and rolling along the ground. Getting to his feet, the youth grows frustrated at coming so close, realizing that was his ultimate chance. He reflects that if he backs down now, he might never get another shot at taking on the herald alone. However, the approaching stone ape horde makes it clear that jumping back into the fight is pure suicide. Faced with the grim reality, the young man grits his teeth in frustration, torn on what to do. Just ahead, Cindermane stands tall before his army, releasing a roar to rally his forces. With that, Zachary turns around, realizing falling back for now is his only option. As he sprints, he knows there's no way he'll make it through the mountains with these injuries. To make matters worse, the horde gives chase, making the ground tremble and likely alerting every enemy for miles. Mid-flight, his eyes lock onto a dark cave sitting in his path. Without a second thought, the boy bolts straight for the cave entrance. Arriving at the mouth, he slides across the ground, stopping right at the edge of the opening. Close behind, the monster horde swarms in, surrounding the entrance to the cave. Now inside the pitch-black space, the youth catches his breath, admitting that might have been a really stupid idea. Despite his dire situation, he knows if he wants to survive and kill the heralds, he'll need a new strategy. The young man understands that this time, he'll need much more than a small fissure to break free. Unleashing his full power, he detonates the cave's structure to collapse the entryway. The explosion causes the rock ceiling to cave in, forming a massive barricade that shuts out the horde. As the dust settles, the youth finally finds safety inside the dark cave, now completely sealed off by the collapse. 13. With one last effort, he uses all his strength to blow up the cave entrance. The explosion causes the rocks to collapse, blocking the passage and stopping the horde's advance. Amidst the dust, the young man finally finds himself safe inside the cave, now sealed by the cave-in. Exhausted, the guy sits down to rest in the silence of the newly sealed cavern. As he bandages his wounds, he laments that even though he's stronger than ever, it's still not enough, now trapped while time ticks away. At least he takes comfort in knowing where one of the last two heralds is, needing only to find another way out. Struggling to stand, he assumes there must be a passage, perhaps connected to the mines where he saw the demons working. With that, the young man decides there's only one way to find out and starts walking deeper into the cave. He then ventures deeper and deeper into the darkness in search of a new path. The corridor leads him through a passage illuminated by glowing blue crystals on the walls. Touching one of the walls, he notices the cosmic energy there is denser, much like what he felt at the mountain peak. Analyzing a fragment, the young man suspects the fourth herald might be inside the mountain itself. The idea makes sense to him, since he searched the rest of the island and found nothing. Suddenly, a distant sound makes him freeze, realizing something is in the dark with him. Carefully, the guy presses himself against the wall, listening to the sound of approaching footsteps. Hidden in the dark, the young man confirms his suspicions when he spots his target. Seeing an imp running through the cave, he concludes the creature's herald must be nearby as well. Suddenly, a larger, darker version of the demon appears holding a crystal, mockingly asking where he thinks he's going. The little imp ignores its presence and keeps moving, chuckling as it approaches a crystal-filled area. With a mischievous grin, the demon moves at high speed, seeming to multiply for a split second. Reaching its destination, it adds the items to a pile of Nexus crystals, making the guy wonder if it was hoarding them. The young man is surprised, not knowing monsters had any use for the crystals, but something more important catches his eye. With a sly smile, he realizes he can follow the creature to find the source of all that power. Just as he prepares to trail the imp, a sudden attack cuts him short. Before he can react, a lizard-like monster lunges out and strikes the little demon, which shrieks in pain. Seeing this, the young man curses the change of plans and wonders what kind of creature that was. The lizard then swallows the imp whole as dark energy wraps around it. Immediately after, the monster's body begins absorbing the demon's energy, undergoing a transformation. In its new form, the creature slams its foot heavily onto the ground. Without hesitation, it charges straight at the young man, who readies himself for the incoming attack. With a single strike, the guy slices the monster in half, ending the fight instantly. After the battle, he sighs, frustrated over losing his only lead. Standing before the pile of crystals, the young man grabs one of the largest for himself. With that, he decides he'll have to track down the imps as best he can. Stashing the crystal away, the boy ventures deeper into the cave to find a new path. Suddenly, a foul, overpowering stench fills the air around him. Covering his face, he sarcastically thinks tracking them will be easier than expected. He just needs to follow that awful stink. As he walks, the guy wonders if the imps have ever heard of a bath, noting the smell isn't the only thing getting stronger. Amidst the stench, a distant metallic clanging catches his attention. He realizes the noise is echoing through the tunnels, confirming he isn't alone. Soon, the young man figures out what's happening as he hears the sound of pickaxes, concluding the demons are mining. With an annoyed glare, he realizes they are harvesting his Nexus crystals. Next, he hears voices speaking in a demonic language coming from a nearby tunnel. Concerned, the boy realizes the sounds are very close and prepares for combat. Looking around, he sees there's nowhere to hide, just as another voice draws near. With heavy steps, 3 demons approach, walking through the cave. Moments later, they emerge from the tunnel, looking exhausted from their work in the mine. One of the demons complains to his buddy, saying the female boss treats them like slaves, but the other warns him to be careful and not let her hear him. Brushing it off, the first replies they're far enough away, and that she wouldn't hear him even if he screamed. As they walk, he keeps whining about being accused of theft despite his heavy load, then asks where they're headed. His partner reveals that someone named Local found a vein packed with crystals, making the other grin at the thought of finally snatching some for himself. Noticing the fear in his companions, he asks what their problem is. Scornfully, the demon questions why they're so afraid of her, while the others tremble in terror. Before they can answer, the young man appears in the blink of an eye and strikes him from behind. Terrified by the sight, the 2 survivors watch in shock, unable to comprehend what just happened. Then, one of them screams for them to run, but it was already too late to escape. Amidst the chaos, Zachary turns with a cold glare, ready for the next strike. Suddenly, a foot wrapped in red bandages stomps hard on the ground, drawing his attention. The impact causes energy from the earth to burst out, creating a small explosion. In the distance, another demon watches the scene, gnashing its teeth in rage. With a swift blow, the young man finishes off one of the demons, while the last one watches in absolute horror. As he runs, the survivor thinks it can't end like this, especially when he was so close to his destination. Before he can warn his comrade Kugo, a dagger strikes him dead on, making him scream in pain. The force slams him against the wall, where he collapses lifeless to the floor. Giving no time for a reaction, a hooded figure dashes forward at blinding speed. Even wounded, the demon tries to reach out, but his strength fades before he can do anything. With a precise move, the hooded figure finishes him off, slitting his throat. With the last demon dead, a bit of blood splatters onto Zachary's boots. Pulling the dagger from the corpse, the young man remarks that was a close one. He then concludes he managed to take them out before they could raise the alarm. With a sigh of relief, he realizes the situation could have turned out really bad. Turning around, the young man is met with an unbelievable sight and curses his awful luck. Before him, the cave opens into a massive hall, crawling with imps and dark creatures. Noticing the intruder, one of the demons gasps in surprise, recognizing him as an elite native. In response, the small imps turn on high alert, demanding to know what the newcomer is doing there. In the center of the hall, the system identifies him as Kugo, the level 44 imp chief. Smirking, Zachary realizes he must be the fourth harbinger and steps forward with confidence. In response, Kugo lets out a shriek and fires a powerful wave of dark energy straight at him. With a swift slide, the young man grazes across the ground, dodging the blast by a hair. He immediately charges one of the guards, who raises his shield to brace for impact. The young man's strike is blocked by the demon's defense, absorbing the full force. Despite the block, the sheer force of the strike begins to crack the enemy's shield. Seeing the opening, a flash of determination gleams in Zachary's eyes. Quickly juking, he slips past the red-haired demon, leaving him turning in confusion. Grabbed by the neck, the red-haired demon yells at his ally Zerez to kill the kid right now. Taking advantage of the angle, the young man impales Zerez right through the other demon's body. Seeing this, Kugo lets out a high-pitched screech and unleashes another blast of dark energy. The surging wave of dark energy forces the fighters to break away. With a sarcastic apology, the young man uses the demons' bodies as a springboard to leap away. He vaults over them, using the momentum to hurl himself directly at Kugo. With a cry of pain, the harbinger takes a direct hit and is engulfed in dark flames. Upon landing, Zachary realizes that wasn't normal fire, noting that unlike regular imps, this harbinger is fast and lethal. He concludes that if the harbinger follows the same pattern, his best bet is to close the distance and attack head-on. While the enemy laughs, the young man pushes through the flames, diving into the smoke. Even knowing he'll get burned, he presses his assault. Leaping high, he launches himself over the other imps, ready to strike. In the blink of an eye, the young man tears through the flames, closing in on his target. Despite the thick smoke, he believes there's gotta be a way through. However, he notices the harbinger seems to have a death wish, willing to burn everything down, including himself. In the background, he spots the demon stirring a cauldron and wonders what on earth he's up to. As he gets closer, the stench coming from the cauldron makes his head spin. Unbothered, the harbinger fires off another blast of dark energy, dialing up the chaos. With that, toxic smoke spreads everywhere, making the battlefield even more hazardous. Trapped by the flames, the young man turns to face the incoming blast. With nowhere to run, he realizes there's no dodging this attack. Cornered, he grits his teeth in frustration, fully aware of how bad the situation is. On the other side, Kugo prepares his next move, swirling a vortex of dark energy. With an evil grin, the harbinger launches his attack, laughing at his opponent's helpless state. The attack explodes, engulfing the entire battlefield in toxic smoke and dark flames. Stunned, the demon turns to see his enemy still standing, shocked that he survived. Standing tall, Zachary declares that if there's no way out, he'll just push right through the fire. As he triggers his skill, he remembers his fight against the armor's previous owner. Back in that battle, the breastplate had the ability to absorb and redirect incoming attacks. With a smile, the young man realizes the skill works on flames too. Wrapped in a protective energy barrier, he vaults into the fire, ready to counterattack. Bursting through the flames, he delivers a devastating blow, slamming into the ground with all his might. Despite landing the hit, the young man drops to one knee, feeling the violent backlash on his body. He coughs up blood, showing that using the skill came at a heavy price. While trying to catch his breath, he curses the toxic smoke filling the air. The vile smell from the cauldron is making him dizzy and disoriented. Seeing the harbinger trying to slip away, he knows he can't let him escape. Eyes full of resolve, the young man raises his axe, refusing to let this chance slip by. With a battle cry, he decides to pour every last drop of his energy into one final strike. Forcing himself up, he readies the killing blow as Kugo tries to run. Putting everything he has into it, the young man roars at his foe, asking where he thinks he's going. The handle of his axe snaps, but he uses the momentum to drive himself forward one last time. In a flash, the young man cuts through the smoke and cleaves the harbinger in two. With the enemy dead, the system notifies him of a level up as the demon's body falls lifeless. Dropping to his knees, he wheezes, feeling his lungs burn from the toxic fumes. As the remaining imps begin to swarm him, The young man knows he has to get out now. Covering his face, he realizes the smoke is way too thick to breathe. Wounded and exhausted, he yanks the spikes out of his flesh, wincing at the sharp pain. He realizes that unless he destroys the source, the smoke could choke out the entire mountain. With the Harbinger dead, his corpse begins to dissolve into the poisonous haze. Right after, the dark energy surges wildly, rapidly flooding the entire cavern. Sensing the mortal danger, the young man turns and bolts for the cave exit. He stumbles along the way, wondering what's happening to his body as intense nausea hits him. The pain hits him like a truck, making him spit blood as he struggles to stay on his feet. With no strength left to fight it, he finally collapses unconscious onto the cave floor. Groaning in pain, the young man slowly wakes up on the cave floor. He then grits his teeth, feeling the effects of the poison in his body. With difficulty, the youth pushes himself up to his knees, feeling like he's going to throw up. Next, he vomits up everything that was in his stomach. As he wipes his face, he wonders what the herald was doing and why, complaining that he didn't even drink the stuff and still threw it all up. Seeing the cauldron, the young man decides with a smirk that the item is now his. Even so, he understands he needs to get out of there first, as he doesn't know how long he was out and someone might come check. On the way, he notices the lizard's body is still where he left it. Seeing the demon's bodies intact, the youth concludes that no one else has passed through there. With that, he grabs a water gourd from one of the bodies to rehydrate. Without hesitation, the boy drinks the liquid to regain some of his strength. After quenching his thirst, he sarcastically thanks the dead demon for the water. He then reflects on how lucky he was to have that armor, whose attack redirecting ability saved his life. Looking at the chest plate, the young man realizes the fractal powering the ability is drained and slowly recharging, seeming to be a daily use skill. Finally, he puts the large Nexus crystal he had taken into his item pouch. Although he doubts the crystals will recharge his armor, the young man decides to absorb a bit of energy just in case he encounters more enemies. With a sigh of relief, he feels his body recover and remarks that he can finally move around without throwing up. Next, the youth opens his status window to check his info. Seeing that he has some points to distribute, he tries to upgrade his stats. Suddenly, an error message catches his attention, leaving him confused. He then wonders why he can't put any more points into strength. The young man questions if he's hit some kind of cap, but thinks it makes no sense for the maximum to be such a low value. Remembering the man from the vision, he's certain that the warrior's strength was far greater. With that, he concludes the limit must be tied to his level and that it might increase as he levels up. The youth also considers that the restriction could be related to his race or class, but he has no idea how to evolve them. Annoyed, he grumbles that he'll be furious if he loses attribute points because of this. Next, he notices he can't put points into luck either, and that the stat only went up because of his titles. With a sigh, the boy laments how much he hates that system. Meanwhile, in another part of the mine, a demon warns his companion to stop trembling, saying the boss can smell fear, but the other replies he can't help it since he didn't meet his daily quota. The scene reveals a massive mining operation, with a white-haired female demon supervising the other's work. One of the guards tries to calm his companions, saying everything will be fine, but another announces that she's coming. With a firm step, the supervisor approaches, walking through the mine with authority. Her eyes glow with intimidating power, watching every move around her. She then stops and stares at the three demons, who tremble in fear in her presence. With trembling hands, one of them steps forward to hand over the day's yield. The demon hands over the pouch, calling her director, while she watches him in silence. With a look of disdain, the woman takes the pouch and inspects it. Next, she pours the crystals into her hand, checking the quantity. In a satisfied tone, she approves the collection and calls the next one in line. Terrified, the next demon approaches, stammering as he tries to explain himself. Having no patience for excuses, the director states that the mine is a blessing to the clan, and she won't allow it to go to waste. She then glares at him and asks if that's what he wants, questioning if he's a traitor to the clan. With a threatening look, the woman lifts him by the chin and asks if he knows what she does to traitors. Desperate, the demon throws himself to the ground, begging for another chance and swearing he'll never fail again. Ignoring his plea, she orders one of her guards to make an example out of him for any other potential traitors. With sword in hand, the guard prepares to execute the fallen demon. Suddenly, something catches his attention, making him turn around in confusion. From above, Zachary observes the scene, ready to intervene at any moment. Without warning, the director shouts that they're under attack. Right after, a horde of salamanders emerges from the ground, attacking the demons in the mine. Amidst the chaos, one of the demons helps his companion up, telling him not to give up. The The guards try to hold off the creature's advance, striking with their swords in a desperate effort. Seeing the scene, the young man comments that the situation is quite convenient for his plans. He then notices the white-haired woman seems to be in command, and taking her out would certainly delay the mining operation. More importantly, the youth realizes that the pouch she's carrying must be full of Nexus crystals. With a mischievous smirk, he decides the salamanders look like they could use a little help. In the middle of the battle, one of the guards prepares to strike, but is caught off guard by an unexpected blow. Suddenly, he's struck by a surprise attack that knocks him to the ground. From atop a pile of crystals, Zachary declares that it's time to get rich. Without hesitation, he leaps toward the battlefield, ready to join the chaos. Upon landing, the young man crushes the crystals under his feet, marking his arrival. Pissed off, the director demands to know who the hell he is. She immediately identifies him as an intruder and orders her guards to ignore the salamanders and kill him. Obeying the order, one of the guards charges forward, dagger in hand, ready to strike. With a quick spin, Zachary prepares to counterattack. In the blink of an eye, he slices off the demon's arm, sending him screaming in agony. Sprawled on the ground, the guard cries over his lost arm, while the young man looks down at him with contempt. Calling them useless, the white-haired woman decides to handle the native herself. With a wave of her hand, she unleashes a vine attack that bursts from the ground. Unflinching, the young man prepares to clash with his glowing axe. He leaps into the air and delivers a powerful strike, severing the vines in a blast of energy. Moving fast, the young man lunges forward with a precise slash. The director grits her teeth, bracing for the impact. To everyone's shock, she blocks the blow with a shimmering barrier of energy. Seeing this, the boy realizes it's the exact same ability as his armor. Upon impact, the young man grunts in pain as he's blasted by his own energy. He quickly realizes her ability is reflecting his own attack back at him. As he tries to pull away, vines shoot up from the ground and wrap around his leg, trapping him. He shouts in frustration, realizing he can't block the attack without getting hit by the reflected energy. Acting fast, the young man stabs his own leg to break free from the vines. Pushing through the pain, he grits his teeth, determined not to give up. With a battle cry, he breaks free and shatters the energy barrier, forcing the guard to dodge. However, the vines yank him back, cutting off his advance. In an instant, the boy is completely enveloped by the plants, leaving him immobilized. Approaching him, the director calls him a thieving rat and accuses him of being one of the elites terrorizing her forces. Smirking, she says ogres will enjoy talking to him. Even trapped, Zachary glares at her defiantly, showing zero fear. Surprised, the woman asks if he still insists on fighting, even while bound and unable to reach her. Suddenly, a surge of energy explodes from within the vines, breaking him free. Shocked, the director leaps back as her attack fails. Shouting in surprise, the director barely dodges his strike, stunned by his raw speed. Wasting no time, he charges forward with all his power, ready to keep pressing the attack. In the blink of an eye, the young man leaps and lunges at the remaining guard. In total shock, the white-haired woman watches her subordinate get killed in a single blow, unable to comprehend how it happened. She begins to wonder if this intruder is even human. Watching him in action, the director concludes he's no human. He's a monster. With that, she realizes his strength might actually match the general's. With tears in her eyes, the woman decides she can't let him leave this place alive. In the name of her clan, she gathers every bit of her energy for one last desperate attack. A wave of power explodes, engulfing the entire battlefield in a blinding light. Seeing this, the young man gets annoyed, realizing she's trying the exact same trick again. The resulting blast devastates the entire area, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and debris. Through the smoke, the young man notices that several of the demon workers fled the moment they saw him. As he bandages his wounds, he concludes his cover is blown and the tunnels will soon be swarming with demons. Because of that, he decides it's best to focus on the last remaining herald. With a grin, the young man tells himself that things aren't so bad after all. He opens the pouch he grabbed and admires the crystals inside. With his eyes gleaming, he celebrates the fact that he's rich. Next, he picks up the dead demon's dress, noting that somehow it survived the blast. Inspecting the garment, the young man realizes it's enchanted, durable, and shares the same attack-reflecting ability as his armor. He catches himself wondering whether or not he should actually wear it. Decision made, the young man puts on the dress completely unbothered by how it looks. He figures if wearing a dress is the difference between life and death, he'll wear it without hesitation. With that, he stands up, knowing he needs to move before more demons show up. As he gets ready to leave, the young man figures that if he backtracks, he might be able to break through the barrier he created. Opening his system screen, a new skill catches his eye. He smiles, pleased when he reads the name of the new ability. The screen reveals the Loam Walker class, which rewards the user with a new skill after walking 1,000 kilometers. The young man assumes it must be some kind of mobility skill, and that it'll be easy enough to complete. Suddenly, his eyes light up as a new system notification pops up. Right after, a special dynamic quest triggers. The quest alerts him to a limited-time event called Ascension, where he must fight for supremacy and claim the fruit of Ascension. Suddenly, the young man has a vision of a mystical fruit detaching from the great tree. Confused, he wonders if this is another vision. Still recovering, he admits he doesn't fully understand it, but he resolves to make that fruit his. Meanwhile, back at the tree, Cindermane and his army receive the exact same system notification. At the demon base, Ogres and his troops are also informed about the fruit of Ascension, which he considers a true treasure. He sarcastically remarks that the merciless heavens are blessing them once again. Suddenly, rage fills his face as a memory strikes him. With a furious roar, he curses the monkey, blaming him for all his troubles. With his hand resting on the table, Ogres finally realizes that Cindermane was sending stone apes to keep his scouts away from the peaks, understanding that the creature wasn't just showing off. Furious, he deduces that Cindermane found the Tree of Ascension a long time ago and has just been waiting for the fruit to ripen ever since. Now, he wonders how that ape managed to break free from the clan's mental bonds, since a discovery like that should have been reported. Faced with this failure, he puts his hand to his head and laments in frustration over how things turned out. Still, the young man claims that Cindermane is in for a nasty surprise if he thinks escaping his control will be that easy. With renewed determination, Ogres turns around and orders a subordinate to assemble the regiments, as they will march toward the mountain. At that moment, Riddell approaches and calls him cousin, asking if he has seen the decree from the unforgiving heavens yet. Without turning around, Ogres replies that he's not blind and that the army will leave immediately, stressing that on this planet, he should be addressed as general. The other finds it ironic that his cousin advocated sending the horde of beasts first, only for them to end up turning against him. With a taunting smirk, Riddell continues, wondering how the elders will react when they find out what happened. Unshaken, Ogres tells the white-armored warrior not to worry about it and to know his place, as he will lead the armies himself to fix the problem. Chuckling, Riddell apologizes and corrects him, stating that while it is indeed a problem, he won't be the one solving it. In a display of power, the white-haired man declares that he will handle everything himself. Faced with clear insubordination, Ogres questions if this is a revolt against the clan's precepts, reminding him that the elders named him leader and threatening him with his grandfather's wrath. With a confident look, Riddell simply answers that his grandfather is already well aware of the whole situation. The warrior in white armor reveals that, because his cousin was named general without being tested, the elders made a deal with his ancestor. He explains that to ensure nothing goes wrong due to Ogres' inexperience, military command is temporarily transferred to him during critical events. Overcome with rage, Ogres snatches the scroll from the other's hand and demands he hand it over immediately. As he reads the decree, fury takes over his face. Unable to believe his eyes, he grits his teeth upon realizing his own grandfather allowed this to happen. With a victorious smile, Riddell tells his cousin not to worry, suggesting he stay in the castle for his own safety until command is handed back. Then the young man informs him that he ordered several of his guards to remain on site, as he now has a fruit to retrieve. Holding the scroll, the warrior turns and says goodbye to his cousin before leaving the room. Left behind, Ogres just watches him leave with a glaring look. Far away, Zachary says that after seeing that same vision, all he wants to do is rush to the location, but he knows he has to be smart about it. He remembers the system talking about coming out victorious and fighting for supremacy, while a limited quest window to claim the fruit pops up. The young man realizes the system conveniently showed the treasure's location. Because of this, he understands the system would only do such a thing for one reason: to spark a bloodbath. Even if the apes and the demons are supposed to be on the same side, Zach doubts either will simply hand the prize over to the other. Concluding that there will be infighting between the two groups, he wonders if he should even try to compete for the fruit. He concludes that it sounds like a suicide mission. Even so, he realizes he doesn't have much of a choice, as a fruit powerful enough to spawn its own quest needs to be taken seriously. With that in mind, Zach decides he can't risk letting the item fall into the hands of his enemies. With the image of his axe severing an opponent's hand, he locks it in his mind that the fruit must be his. He calculates that with 12 hours until it ripens, there is no reason to rush. The young man knows that arriving too early would only make him an easy target amidst the chaos. After all, unlike the others, he doesn't have an entire army to cover his back in battle. So, his plan is to sneak in at the last minute to kill the herald and steal the fruit, avoiding direct confrontation as much as possible. He further considers that, with any luck, he might take down the general, but he'd have to run for his life right after. Taking a deep breath, he understands this mission is all or nothing, as success could solve all his problems. However, he also considers the possibility of failing. In that scenario, his journey would become even harder, no matter who ends up with the fruit in the end. With a confident smile, Zachary decides that he had better just not fail then. Wasting no time, the young man begins to scale the treacherous stone mountain with the help of his axe. He continues his steep climb up the rocky slope in the rain, until suddenly he stops and holds his breath. The sound of battle echoes through the mountain as the demons clash fiercely with the stone apes. With wild roars, the massive stone creatures charge forward, destroying everything and everyone in their path. Finally, as he nears the top, Zachary comes across the massive battle unfolding in the rain, right beneath the sacred tree. Watching from a distance, Zachary analyzes that the demons clearly have the upper hand, since for every one of them killed, at least 3 stone apes are brought down. Even so, the young man figures the tide of battle could still turn. He reflects that while the demons' spells cost energy, the apes can throw rocks all day long. On top of that, the stone creatures are fighting on their home turf, where they feel stronger and more confident. Either way, the youth understands that all this chaos is exactly what he needed to make his move. Suddenly, his gaze locks onto a spot on the battlefield, and he realizes that figure can only be one person. With a single swing of his sword, General Rydell cuts down several of the stone creatures at once. With a victorious smirk, Zachary thanks the general for leaving his fortress completely unprotected for him. Then, the guy decides it's time to move, and leaps toward the battlefield, hoping nobody notices his lack of horns. He lands heavily on the ground, cracking the earth with the impact of his arrival. Sprinting through the chaos of battle, he thinks to himself that there's nothing to see here, just a guy blending in as a demon. As he passes a squad, a few soldiers are startled by his sudden and unexpected presence. One of the female demons shouts a question at him in her native tongue. Without slowing down, the young man just mumbles a confirmation and keeps moving forward. Given the strange response, the group of soldiers watches him walk away with a look of suspicion. Trying to slip by unnoticed, Zachary hopes the soldiers just let him keep walking. However, the red-haired demon keeps a close eye on him and realizes he's a human. In the blink of an eye, the archer fires an arrow, but the guy deflects it with his axe. Standing tall before the group, Zachary warns them that they're the ones who should have kept walking. With his axe charged with energy, the young man charges straight at the 3 of them. He leaps toward the warrior, who readies herself to block the incoming attack. With a single strike, his weapon shatters the demon's sword and lands a direct hit on her. The sight leaves the archer completely stunned by the sheer power of the blow. Without hesitating, the guy spins and catches the other 2 soldiers in a single fluid sweeping motion. Enveloped in his aura, he simply states that he had warned them. Seeing that there are only 19 minutes left, he keeps running, deciding to avoid more fights so he doesn't gain experience before eating the fruit. The youth isn't sure if this will break his strength limit, but it's the only solution he can think of to solve his problem. Suddenly, he stops as he notices something strange in the forest, wondering what could have happened there. Up ahead, the battle between the demons and the stone apes rages on just as fiercely as before. Touching a tree, he notices it turns to dust, as if all the cosmic energy in the valley had been completely drained. With a battle cry, a demon attacks a fallen stone ape, while Zachary sneaks up from behind. After delivering the blow, the soldier grumbles something in his tongue, sword still in hand. Suddenly, the warrior senses a presence and turns around startled, but it's already too late. With a swift motion, the hooded youth strikes him from behind, taking him down instantly. Standing over the body, Zachary regrets not being able to stay under the cover of the trees, but he knows he has no choice since the fruit will ripen soon. So, he decides he needs to get into position, planning to head west where the fighting is less intense. As he turns, the young man figures he might be able to slip past the armies undetected along that path. Without further delay, he knows it's time to move, and sprints off at full speed. With only 10 minutes remaining, Zachary dashes through the middle of the battlefield, leaving a trail of energy in his wake. He weaves and dodges through the combatants, carving a path through the chaos of war. Out of breath, the guy abruptly comes to a halt when he runs into a barrier, wondering what on earth it is. He quickly identifies a force field around the tree, concluding it must be the system's doing given the fractals on its surface. With only 6 minutes left, the youth bets the barrier will drop as soon as the fruit is fully ripe. Outside, the battle rages on, while everyone is kept from getting anywhere near the tree. Inside the force field, only Rydell and Cindermane stare each other down, with the creature roaring in defiance. Wasting no time, Cindermane launches himself into the air in a direct attack against the general. Facing the assault, Rydell just flashes a confident smirk, ready for battle. Soon, the two clash in a fierce duel, trading sword strikes and punches at lightning speed. With a furious roar, the creature gathers all its strength for the next move. However, the guy in white armor stares him down with a victorious look, getting ready to counter. With a swift slash of his blade, the general releases a wave of energy that hits the herald head-on. Stricken, Cindermane falls to his knees, gasping for air and clearly wounded by the strike. Standing tall, Rydell wipes the blade of his sword, looking down at his defeated opponent. From afar, Zachary notes that while his own attacks barely scratch the herald's skin, the general is dicing him up effortlessly, leaving him with no chance at all. Realizing something must be done to turn the tables, the young man decides that responsibility is going to fall on him. With under 2 minutes left, the tree's energy pulses wildly as Cindermane and Rydell lock eyes. Suddenly both look up, caught off guard by a new presence. Right above them, Zachary hovers in the air, enveloped in a surging aura of power. With a fierce grin, he prepares to unleash everything he's got. Channeling all his energy into his axe, he slams it down into the ground with massive force. The impact triggers a blinding explosion that consumes the entire area. Through the swirling dust and debris, the young man's silhouette remains standing. Panting, he lands on the ground, wondering where the other two went. At that exact moment, the general's sword thrusts toward him in a surprise attack. With lightning reflexes, Zach manages to block the blade using the shaft of his axe. Clashing face to face, Rydell growls that he recognizes that armor, identifying Zach as Keveran's killer. The general then declares he'll return the favor, launching into a swift spin attack. Unable to keep up with the movements, Zach realizes the demon is way too fast. The demon's sword slashes across Zach's side, cutting right through his defenses. The blow sends Zachary flying back, shattering parts of his armor from the sheer force. Bleeding and out of breath, Zach curses under his breath, questioning if jumping in here was a mistake. Standing before him, Rydell notes that with Zach's enchantment worn off, they can finally fight on equal footing. With that, the three warriors lock in a tense standoff, each sizing up his two opponents. The tension skyrockets as Zach, Cindermane, and the general exchange grim glares across the battlefield. With a smirk, the demon assumes he's face-to-face with the native's leader, mocking him for finally coming out of hiding. He adds that the moment the dynamic quest popped up, he knew Zach wouldn't resist trying to snatch the treasure for himself. Sword in hand, Rydell challenges him to prove he's worthy of standing on this battlefield. Analyzing his opponent, Zach realizes this guy is far stronger than anyone he's ever faced. Even if his own strength stat is higher, Zach knows it doesn't mean a thing if the general never lets him land a hit. Turning to his other enemy, the young man decides to address the giant ape. He proposes they set their differences aside and focus on the bigger threat right in front of them. In response, Cindermane just lets out a furious roar, completely rejecting the offer. The beast then slams the ground violently, making it clear to Zach that a truce isn't happening. Ignoring the herald, Rydell and Zachary charge straight at each other in a simultaneous clash. The collision of their weapons sparks a massive energy blast that lights up the entire area. After the blast, the general leaps back to create some distance. From above, he watches both opponents recovering from the impact below. Sword raised, the demon channels his energy, prepping for his next move. Seeing the general's power on display, Zach realizes he's at a total disadvantage here. Dodging an incoming strike, he bolts, knowing he has to act fast with only 34 seconds left. Noticing the other two positioning themselves to grab the fruit as soon as the shield drops, an idea hits him. Just like that, he knows exactly where his enemies are going to be. The demon then slices right through the rock the herald was standing on, splitting them onto separate floating platforms. Seeing this, Zach realizes both the general and the final herald are wide open for the taking. Right on cue, another massive clash erupts between the two up on the floating rocks. Seeing the distraction, Zach knows this is his one golden opportunity to strike. With only 15 seconds on the clock, he charges his axe with every last bit of his energy. Knowing there's no more time to waste, he readies himself for the final blow. With pure fury in his eyes, he resolves to kill them both right here, right now. With a roar, Zachary rushes forward at full speed, channeling everything he's got. With just 10 seconds left, Zach's attack rips forward, tearing the battlefield in two. As the attack hurtles toward them, Rydell and Cindermane stare in shock, completely out of time to react. Still, the general barely manages to raise his blade and block the assault at the very last second. Even through his guard, the sheer force takes him by surprise as he wonders what kind of power this is. A split second later, a massive explosion blasts him backward, shattering the stone platform to pieces. With both opponents thrown off, Zachary dashes through the falling debris. Using the floating rocks as stepping stones, he leaps straight toward the top of the tree. In the final second, he reaches the main branch and strikes it with a powerful swing of his axe. At that exact moment, the force field surrounding the tree finally shatters into dust. With the barrier gone, his attack severs the branch, releasing the fully ripened fruit of ascension. As the fruit falls, Zack reaches out and snatches it right out of the air. He finally holds the prize in his hands, knowing full well that the hard part is just beginning. Fruit in hand, he glances back down, feeling a wave of dread, because the real challenge was surviving the escape, with both opponents already glaring up at him from below. With no time to lose, Zachary grits his teeth and prepares to escape with the fruit in hand. He quickly stashes the item in his clothes to protect it while running. Soon, he realizes that all eyes in the valley, including entire armies, are now locked on him. Leaving his main opponents behind, he knows his priority has shifted. Filled with new resolve, the young man decides that all he needs to do now is get out of there. At that exact moment, Riddell fires a powerful beam of energy straight at him to stop him. To clear a path, Zachary turns to the horde and orders everyone to move out of his way. He then dives into the crowd, carving a path with his axe right through the demon army. Surrounded, the young man realizes stealing the fruit wouldn't be that easy, but he accepts the challenge. As his axe glows, he warns that if his enemies want to throw their lives away just to slow him down, so be it. With that, the young man unleashes a massive tornado of energy, sending everyone around him flying into the air. Gasping for breath, he watches the demons' bodies rain down after the devastating attack. Before pushing on, he takes a step back to catch his breath and keep moving forward. Suddenly, his eyes widen as he senses a new threat approaching. Without warning, the general appears in his path, blocking his way and telling him not to go so fast. The general's attack sends Zachary flying back with a violent force. The young man tries to regain his balance in midair as he's blasted away by the power of the strike. With a cry of pain, he crashes into a massive rock formation that shatters upon impact. Gasping and battered, the young man props himself up on the ground, cursing his bad luck. Getting up, he realizes that escaping with the fruit is off the table, as his enemies have joined forces to stop him. Facing Cindermane and Rydell, the young man sarcastically remarks that he feels flattered by all the attention. Without a second thought, all three charge at each other in a head-on clash. The collision of their powers triggers another massive explosion of energy. The shockwave rattles the entire battlefield with violent force. From the impact, both the demons and the stone apes are sent flying through the air. Worried, one of the soldiers rushes toward the fight to help his general. However, Zerez stops him, telling him to back off since he would only get in General Rydell's way. Besides, the elite guard questions what they could even do in a battle between monsters like them. In the heat of the fight, Zachary feels his opponent getting faster and faster, realizing he can't break free. The young man pushes himself to the limit just to keep up with the demon's relentless speed and blows. Mid-block, Zachary grows irritated with the demons and their lightning attacks. He realizes that blocking is useless, as the energy keeps shocking him anyway. To make matters worse, he notices that this demon possesses a Dao seed, making every single strike razor-sharp. Even while defending himself, his body gets covered in painful electrical cuts. Suddenly, he realizes the lightning is causing his muscles to spasm, paralyzing him. Seizing the opening, the general pierces him with his sword in a precise blow. With the blade run through his body, the young man falls to his knees, defeated and bleeding. Standing tall, Riddell calls him pathetic, asking if that was the best he could do after stealing from him. With that, the demon steps closer, saying he will take the fruit back. However, before he can act, Cindermane hits him with a powerful punch that sends him flying. The herald recovers and readies himself for battle, his fists glowing with energy. Furious, Rydell calls the ape a flea-ridden beast, cursing how Ogres's incompetence causes him trouble even without trying. He continues his rant, questioning the idea of using beasts in battle and allowing them to defy them. The general then swears that if it weren't for his grandfather, Ogres would be punished, promising things will change once he gets what he wants. But before he can finish his thought, Cindermane is suddenly sliced in half by an invisible attack. Cindermane's body falls apart, revealing Rydell standing right behind the creature. In place of the herald, Zachary floats in the air, remarking that he didn't plan on killing him first, but accepts the outcome as he levels up twice. With the creature's death, the system screen updates his quest, showing that 4 out of the 5 targets have been eliminated. Standing recovered, the young man stares down the general, stating that now he's the only one left. With an air of superiority, Riddell scoffs at the idea that any of the heralds could match his true strength. The demon then charges forward at high speed to strike, as the young man prepares for the impact. The clash between their weapons triggers a wave of energy, and Zack identifies his opponent's power as the Tao of heaviness. He reflects on the 2 abilities he had been using repeatedly, the Tao of chopping and his own energy. He realizes that until now he had never used them together, but now both have merged like converging rivers. By combining the 2 forces, Zachary creates a new power and releases it against the general. With a mighty roar, the young man unleashes all his energy at once. Shocked, Rydell screams that it's impossible, since this world didn't even exist 3 months ago, and the boy should be nothing to him. The collision of their powers triggers a massive explosion that soars into the sky like a pillar of light. Wounded and breathless, the general stares at his opponent in disbelief as part of his armor, and one of his swords shatter. Enraged, the demon calls him a worm and unleashes a final attack, leaving the young man to only dread what's coming. A rain of energy swords descends from the sky at terrifying speed. In a dark explosion, Zachary shields himself from the devastating attack. Even so, the young man screams and stands his ground as a wave of power rushes against him. The clash of energies results in an explosion that shatters the battlefield. With his body impaled by multiple swords, the young man falls to his knees, bleeding and critically injured. Amidst hundreds of blades impaled in the ground, Rydell walks slowly toward his opponent. Down and bloodied, Zachary desperately tries to force his body to move. Soon, the general hurls one of his swords directly at him as he remains motionless and exhausted. Confused by what's happening, the young man watches the blade freeze in midair, right in front of his face. Suddenly, Rydell's body locks up and he loses control of his movements, stammering without being able to react. Emerging from behind, Ogres greets him sarcastically as he runs him through with a sword of shadows. With his last breath, the general screams his cousin's name in a mix of fury and betrayal. Taking in the sight, the newcomer simply cracks a wide, maniacal grin. Rydell's lifeless body hits the ground, while Ogres stands over him with a shadowy weapon in hand. Completely shocked, Zachary leans on his axe, unable to comprehend what just happened. Amidst the chaos, the army's soldiers look on confused, not knowing how to react to their leader's death. Soon, the last stone apes are put down as disorder spreads among the demons. Outraged, Zerez points at the newcomer and loudly accuses him of being a traitor. The guard then orders his men to attack him, declaring he has betrayed the clan. Still in disbelief, Zachary silently wonders if Ogres really killed the general. Facing the accusation, the purple-haired man merely smirks with cocky confidence. One of the loyal soldiers charges in a rage at the traitor, screaming that this was for General Rydell. Unfazed, Ogres catches the charging soldier's energy spear. With a simple touch, he effortlessly dissolves the weapon in his hand. Seeing this, Zachary wonders if the demon saved his life on purpose or if it had nothing to do with him. He then wonders why he hasn't received any system notification about the general's death. Standing before his cousin's body, Ogres slowly turns toward Zach, but before taking another step, he breaks into a coughing fit and spits a large amount of dark blood onto the ground. Ogres' body falls to the ground, motionless. Suddenly, the system notifies him that the last of the 5 targets has been defeated. With the general dead, the main quest is finally complete. Confused, Zerez and his soldiers watch the scene, at a loss for what to do. His head spinning, Zachary wonders if the other demon had just killed himself. He tries to figure out if Ogres was an assassin from another faction, but quickly questions why they would ruin their own invasion. The young man reflects that with all the heralds and the general dead, the incurse should be over. Unable to think clearly, he turns around and realizes he is still surrounded by hundreds of demons. Observing the enemy army's confusion, he notices they seem just as lost as he is, and that he only has a few seconds to act. Meanwhile, Ogre's body twitches on the ground and moves. Surprised, Zachary turns around just in time to see his enemy standing back up. With a cough, the demon gets up and remarks on how unpleasant that experience was. Suspicious, the young man prepares to attack, warning that he isn't taking any chances. However, before he can advance, Ogres raises his hand and tells him to wait. With a grin, the purple-haired man says they are on the same side. Unconvinced, Zachary doubts the claim and challenges him to give one reason why he shouldn't take his head off right now. Still breathless, Ogres explains that if the kid kills him, the soldiers will kill him next, stating he knows about the stolen cauldron and ordering him to throw the contents into the fire. Not trusting him, Zachary asks why he should believe his words and why he killed the other demon. The other replies that it doesn't matter right now, reiterating that if he doesn't act, they'll both die anyway. Seeing the army approaching, Zachary agrees with the urgency of the situation and admits the demon is right. He knows there's no way he can fight his way out in his current state, so he decides it's time for a desperate gamble. With that, the young man agrees and pulls a massive, bubbling cauldron from his inventory. With all his strength, he hurls the object high into the air toward the center of the valley. The cauldron shatters on the ground, releasing a cloud of dark, poisonous smoke. The toxic gas rapidly spreads across the entire area in a massive wave. Recognizing Kugo's poison, the soldiers scream that Ogres has gone mad as they all begin to choke. In the middle of the mist, Zachary asks what they do now, and the other man begins to answer. Ogres then wishes the human good luck and places what looks like an antidote into his mouth. In the blink of an eye, the demon vanishes from the battlefield, leaving the young man behind. Left alone, Zachary looks at a light at the bottom of the crater and curses the demon for his betrayal. Realizing his mistake, he starts running, knowing the mountain winds will soon spread the poison cloud across the whole valley. Amidst the poisonous chaos, Zachary runs as fast as he can, telling himself not to breathe. He keeps pushing through the toxic mist, forcing himself to just keep running. Soon, he realizes it's useless, as the poison begins to seep into his wounds. He feels the toxin entering his bloodstream and spreading through his body. Cursing the traitorous demon, he knows he needs to reach the mountains where the poison won't rise. With all his strength, the young man pushes himself forward, repeating to himself to keep going. However, he stumbles and realizes he can no longer resist the poison's effect. Finally, he loses his breath and is forced to inhale the contaminated air. As he collapses to the ground, he realizes the potency of this poison is on a completely different level. Lying there, he spots a glowing lake and thinks he might be safe in there. Without hesitation, he dives into the water, planning to swim to the bottom to escape. He hopes to find a passage to the mountain, figuring the cosmic energy-filled water must connect to the crystal mine. Suddenly, a golden energy bursts from his arm, completely taking him by surprise. Soon, the energy burns his entire body, and he screams that it's too hot while thrashing in the water. In agony, Zachary realizes that the water will kill him faster than the poison, and panics at the thought of dying from an overdose of super water. Out of options, he forces himself to reach out and pull the fruit of ascension from his clothes. Hoping it will save him, he takes a bite and eats the fruit all at once. Tasting it, he is surprised to find that the fruit is delicious. Relieved, the young man thanks the heavens as he feels the item working, thinking he might actually survive. However, he soon questions why he is feeling the intense heat of the water again. Suddenly, he realizes something is wrong, as the fruit is healing him. But right after, the water burns him repeatedly all over again, and he screams that he can't take this cycle of pain anymore. His body is then subjected to extreme heat and cold, a sensation he considers worse than swords or lightning. In absolute torment, he begs for the pain to stop, no longer able to feel his arms. As his body contorts in spasms, he loses all sensation in his chest and everywhere else, before finally blacking out. Inside a crystal cave, water slowly drips, creating a soft echo. Suddenly, Zachary bursts out of a pool of water, desperately gasping for air. He collapses onto the ground, coughing and spitting out the water he had swallowed. He keeps coughing as he tries to recover from nearly drowning. Exhausted, he groans on the floor and tries to push himself up, still feeling the aftermath of his ordeal. With the last of his strength, he calls out to view his status screen. Looking at the display, he remarks that he doesn't feel much different, though he quickly admits he actually feels terrible. At least he takes comfort in seeing that his strength has finally broken past the 175-point mark. Next, he decides to check out his 2 new titles. The screen displays the titles One Against Many and Planetary Aegis, along with their respective stat rewards. With a smirk, he congratulates himself on taking first place once again. Still recovering, he braces himself against the ground to try and stand up. With a sigh, he wonders how many demons managed to make it out of that situation alive. He figures that weird demon definitely survived, and even though he doesn't trust him, he vows to track him down for a proper chat. Finally, Zachary decides to check his new quests. Seeing the notification, he feels relieved that the quest is complete and calculates that he can collect the rewards back at his camp. Then he notices a new, unique quest has started a 43-day countdown, leaving him with a strict deadline to act. However, he finds it strange that his walking class quest hasn't progressed at all, even though he's certain he's run dozens of kilometers. With a thoughtful look, he tries to figure out the reason behind the failure. Glancing down at his feet, it finally dawns on him that he hasn't actually been touching the ground this whole time. Realizing this, he sits down and starts pulling off his boots to get rid of them. Before long, he completely removes the makeshift footwear he had been wearing. Barefoot, he claims he's much better off now, since his feet have grown tough enough to walk on broken glass. Fully recovered, he stands up with a smile, declaring that it's time to move on. Before leaving, he decides to fill a container with water from the pool, just in case. Heading deeper into the mine, Zachary mentions that he expected to run into a few more demons around here. He figures that even if everyone in the valley was wiped out, there should still be some hiding inside the mines. Still, he finds himself puzzled as he realizes the place is completely deserted. Undeterred, he continues his way through the darkness of the abandoned cave. Up ahead, all he finds are more glowing crystals resting in a minecart on the tracks. Stepping out into the sunlight, Zachary is greeted by the transformed landscape outside the mountain. With a faint smile, he realizes something has changed, and that this is something new. He soon notices that the red pillar is gone, but he understands his work here isn't finished yet. Looking at the destroyed demon camp and the massive fortress, he is impressed by the sheer scale of the structure. Walking through the forest, He can see the enemy worked hard to build a place like that. However, he can't understand why the walls, which used to be heavily guarded, are now completely empty. He notices that even the watchtowers are totally deserted. Even so, he spots smoke rising from inside the fortress, proving that someone is still in there. Running along the top of the wall, he decides to investigate what's going on. As he advances, he leans down and picks up a crystal fragment off the ground. Crouching, he wonders if the demons simply gave up after their general died. Sitting on the edge, he questions if the army in the valley was all they had, but he quickly concludes the answer is no. Looking down, he sees there are still a few demons left, though he notices they don't look like warriors at all. Watching the few survivors, he realizes they seem completely lost. In silence, one of the demons walks alone through the empty, desolate streets of the city. Moving quietly, Zachary sneaks up from behind the unsuspecting demon. In one swift motion, he grabs him and covers his mouth to keep him from screaming. Then he drags him into a dark alley so they won't be seen. With a stern look, he warns him that if he screams, he dies, asking if he understands what he's saying. Terrified, the young demon trembles and quickly nods his head. Zachary tells him he just wants some answers and promises to leave him alone if he cooperates. Still shaking, the demon stammers out an agreement, and Zach lets him go. Zachary then asks why they're still on his island when the incursion failed and they haven't gone back home. The young demon explains that some of them can't return, as they brought shame to their clan with the failure, and terrible things would happen if they went back. Because of that, some chose to stay on this planet to escape punishment. Shocked, Zachary realizes there are now demon refugees on his island and asks how many of them are left. The demon replies that he doesn't know for sure since his job is just filing documents, but he suggests Ogres would know since he was the general of the incursion. With a glare, Zach accuses him of lying, claiming the general is dead and that he saw him get brought down himself. Desperate, the young demon denies it and swears that Ogres is still alive. Suspicious, Zachary asks if Ogres has white hair, silver armor, and fights with a lightning sword. The other demon blinks and explains that was Rydell, the second in command. Confused, Zachary wonders why Rydell was leading the army if he wasn't the actual general. He tries to make sense of it all, since his gut tells him Ogres was the one who helped him, but he can't wrap his head around why the quest completed if the real general is still alive. Frustrated by the mystery, he sets his questions aside and demands to know where Ogres went. The demon explains that after interrogating several demons in the palace, the general left and headed south. With a look of disgust, Zachary realizes that the south is exactly where his outpost is located, concluding that of course it would be. Before leaving, he turns back to the demon and asks for one last thing. The young demon introduces himself as Zachareth, adding that his friends call him Zach. With a smirk, Zachary stares at him for a moment. Then he gives him a far from friendly welcome to Earth. With a single strike, he hits the demon on the head with the butt of his axe handle. The demon instantly passes out and drops to the ground as Zachary quietly walks away. Thinking about the refugees and the missing general, he prepares himself for whatever comes next. He gazes at the horizon, fully aware that even though the incursion is over, a new mission has already begun. Still, he decides it's time to head home because he doesn't want to keep Ogres waiting. In an unfamiliar forest, Ogres steps onto new and mysterious terrain. Standing still, he observes his surroundings with a thoughtful and curious expression. Facing a makeshift camp, the demon wonders if this is the base of operations for his clan's great nemesis. With disdain, he kicks the campfire and remarks that the place looks more like an animal's lair. Soon, upon finding a bloody piece of bandage on the ground, he corrects himself, saying it actually looks like the home of a rabid animal. Incredulous, he leans against an RV and questions how creatures living like this managed to ruin their invasion, finding the whole situation disgusting. Still, upon finding a nexus node, he notes that at least his enemies aren't complete beasts, since they had the good sense to buy the equipment. He then thinks that, having failed the incursion, he should be barred from using the node, but decides to try anyway. However, upon touching the crystal, his hand is repelled by a surge of energy, and he curses in frustration at the failure. Facing the lockout, the demon concludes they won't be able to integrate their town and will remain isolated for a long time. Despite this, he turns around and consoles himself, realizing that with the demons left behind, he can build a new sphere of influence, with or without the approval of the heavens. Suddenly, a sound catches his attention, and he looks to the side, sensing an unexpected presence. To his surprise, a portal opens and out steps the human he thought was dead. Shocked, he wonders how the man survived, and if he's some kind of immortal monster preparing his shadow sword. Seeing him approach, Ogres thinks he's a lunatic because, for heaven's sake, he isn't even wearing shoes. With an angry expression, Ogres worries that the human might have already eaten one of the fruits. He grinds his teeth and stares at the Nexus node, frustrated by the turn of events. With a sigh, the demon laments and walks away, visibly annoyed. Crouching among the trees, Zachary notices that although the illusion barrier is intact, something feels off. To be safe, he drinks some of the water he collected, preparing himself for whatever he might face. Then, he dashes at high speed through the barrier and enters the camp. Upon his arrival, the demon sitting at the table greets him, saying the natives are aggressive barbarians. Unfazed, he invites him to take a seat and join him. Suspicious, Zachary just stares at him silently and calls him by name. Ogres greets him back and asks if his subordinates are still alive since he visited the refugee camp. Zach confirms they are and asks how he found his outpost. With a smirk, the demon explains that anyone with a decent skill could detect the illusion barrier and that they found the place after investigating his movements. He goes on to say he can't believe the guy lives in a cramped, bloody sardine can. Disgusted, he asks if the humans on this planet have no idea how to build proper structures. The demon reveals that either way they ran into him in the tunnels before they could use their knowledge of the area to their advantage. Ignoring the taunts, Zachary demands to know why he's there and why the other demons are still on his island. Sitting back, Ogres states he came to meet him, assuming he'd return after the battle, and that now that the incursion is over, they don't need to be enemies anymore. Sensing an opportunity, Zachary realizes the demon thinks he has a team behind him and decides to play along. With a serious expression, Zachary says the demon needs to understand this world was integrated less than 2 months ago, and there are things they don't know. The other explains that when Zach completed his quest, the incursion ended, giving them 12 hours to leave before the portal closed. Among the chaos, some failed to make it in time, while others simply chose to stay and cut all ties with their clan. Ogres adds that even if they wanted to, returning would be nearly impossible now that the ruthless heavens have sealed the portal. Suspicious, Zachary questions his indifferent attitude after so many deaths, the real motive behind his visit, and what these ruthless heavens actually are. The demon explains it refers to the system, which goes by many names, and that he's sure the human knows what he's talking about. He then asks why he should care about the dead, since life and death mean nothing in the multiverse. With a grim look, Ogres reveals that long before coming here, all his siblings had already fallen in battle or been murdered by their own clan. He goes on to explain that their sole reason for coming was to gather resources. The demon reveals that young worlds like this are brimming with treasures, and that countless incursions are happening at this very moment. Surprised, Zach asks why the system didn't punish him, since the Stargazer told him that failure meant certain doom. With a mocking smile, Ogres asks if he's the Stargazer, and laughs at the thought that all his plans were ruined by a lie. Confused, Zachary asks about the lie, and the demon explains that the ruthless heavens don't punish. At worst, they simply lose interest. With a dark smile, Ogres welcomes him to the multiverse, a cold place where the honest are slaughtered and only the calculating survive. Sitting at the table, Zachary asks if all other incursions are led by demons like him. The other replies probably not, which is why they need each other, because if he thought his clan was bad, he hasn't seen anything yet. Skeptical, Zach questions the need for an alliance, and the demon explains his side has labor and knowledge, while Zach's side has a sanctuary. He reveals that the ruthless heavens suppress the power of foreign entities in young worlds, and they'd be safe on the island until someone found them. Ogres extends his hand, stating that more importantly, by becoming a lord, Zach could provide a sanctuary within a system-sanctioned town, something he can't do himself. Swatting the demon's hand away, the young man says he isn't a lord yet and still has a quest to complete. The other replies he'll eventually become one and will be able to buy town structures, like defenses worth millions of Nexus coins. Smirking, he asks Zach to share his quest info so he knows what it takes for him to become a lord. Annoyed, the youth says his name is Zach and refuses to share his quest with him. Ogres explains that sharing a quest just means displaying the system screen, not letting him complete it too. With a provocative look, he says he's sure Zach and his allies have already shared plenty of notifications with each other. Realizing it's a trap, the young man understands the demon knows he's alone, and annoyed agrees to show it. Soon the system screen displays the quest details, which the demon identifies as a monster horde quest. The demon explains the quest will send beasts instead of intelligent foes, as the description mentions inhabitants rather than forces. Turning away, he predicts the quest will begin as soon as the timer ends, bringing 1 wave per month, giving Zach a month and a half to grow stronger and prepare. The young man then demands to know the location of the crystals mined by the demon's faction, stating that if they're working together, his side needs to contribute. Faced with the demand, Ogres simply replies he fears his men took the crystals back through the portal with them. With a sly grin, the demon hints that maybe they didn't manage to take all of them. Irritated by the response, Zachary says he's sure the demon will manage to find a few. Changing the subject, Ogres suggests their first purchase should be a smelting furnace to refine the raw crystals into graded versions. Suspicious, the youth questions the use of the word there, which the demon promptly confirms. The purple-haired demon argues that even after such a short chat, Zach should already realize how useful it is to have them around. Zachary agrees they can work together, considering the demon killed Rydell and helped him poison half his own army. With a smile, Ogres asks him to keep those details quiet so they don't lose the trust of the remaining demons. Leaning over the table, the general then asks if he's aware that he's been poisoned. Shocked by the revelation, Zachary stands up and draws his weapon. In a rage, he slams his axe onto the table and demands the demon start talking. Startled, Ogres tells him to calm down and reveals the issue is the cosmic water he drank. Still furious, the youth accuses him of poisoning the lake, but the demon instantly denies it. The general explains the water was poisonous from the start, and only a lunatic would drink it raw, as it burns energy pathways from the inside. He adds that while it restores cosmic energy in seconds, it damages the body and can even be fatal. Despite the explanation, Zachary claims he feels fine and doesn't notice anything wrong. The demon then dares him to try restoring his energy naturally, without relying on any items. With a dismissive air, the youth agrees and decides to put it to the test. However, upon trying, he's shocked to realize something is terribly wrong with his body. He notices that even though he isn't a cultivator, energy used to flow back into his body at a steady pace, but now he can barely feel a trickle. Desperate, he asks how to fix it, and Ogres says he's heard of pills, but they're extremely rare since anyone who drinks that water usually dies within a day. The demon explains Zach needs to heal his ruined energy channels, because if he keeps forcing it, things will only worsen until he dies of energy starvation. Frustrated, the young man realizes that if he doesn't heal in time, he'll have to fight the monster horde without using any cosmic energy. Ogres suggests spending time in energy-dense areas might help his body recover, though he admits he isn't sure how effective it would be. Sitting silently, Zachary just takes in the information. With a grunt, Ogres complains that progenitors annoy him to no end, leading the young man to ask what he means. Furious, the demon points at him and says he's talking about him and the other first-generation cultivators who fail to realize the advantages they hold. He goes on, saying they know nothing, yet even when they do the stupidest things, they still come out on top. Sitting down, Ogres explains that the system floods new worlds with unique titles and treasures, and for some reason, obtaining Dao seeds is far easier. With a sly grin, he peeks through his fingers and asks what insane reward the youth got for winning the incursion. Suspicious, Zachary wonders if it's wise to do this with him around, given his lack of trust. He understands the demon is trying to get on his good side to kill or rob him, but concludes it's better to keep him close where he can watch him. With that, the young man decides that if he sent him away, the demon would just hide and spy on him anyway. Without further hesitation, he approaches the Nexus node and says they'll find out the rewards together. The system calculates the young man's personal contribution and performance, distributing the rewards shortly after. With a flash, the chests open, revealing Nexus crystals and E-grade gear. The screen then describes the new attire, which features self-healing and self-cleaning fractals, along with the ability to absorb and negate 2 attacks per day. Pleased with the new gear, Zach says now they're talking his language. Shortly after, the youth steps out of the RV already wearing his new outfit. Seeing him, Ogres applauds and says the clothes are top quality, making him look far more civilized. With a smile, he remarks that through his actions and sense of fashion, the young man has cultivated a strong image among his people. Still wary, Zachary agrees, but says it remains to be seen how well they'll work together. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake violently, catching them both off guard. Furious, Zach shouts and asks what he did, but the demon denies doing anything. Soon they see a massive wave forming and surging toward the island. Stunned by the sight, both stare at the ocean, and the demon mutters that it's impossible. Amidst the waters, a massive rocky structure begins to glow and surface. From the depths, an enormous shipyard rises, complete with vessels and docks. The system screen then announces that a medium E-grade Iliex shipyard has been granted as a reward. Confused, both scratch their heads, unable to grasp what's happening. Suddenly, the demon gets excited and asks what that is, and if it's upgradable. Annoyed, Zachary tells him to calm down and asks what he's talking about. With a laugh, the demon asks him to inspect the building and share the details. Unsure how to do it, the young man opens his system interface and quickly finds what he was looking for. With a simple tap, the information appears, confirming the shipyard is indeed upgradable. Surprised, Ogres questions how ridiculously high the youth's luck is and concludes that a shipyard built by a maker changes everything. Perplexed, Zachary asks if it really changes anything, since he could have built a shipyard himself. With disdain, the demon explains the Iliacs are a race of living golems and master builders whose creations are the most sought after in the multiverse. He points to the shipyard and says receiving a structure staffed by them is unheard of. Intrigued, Zach asks if cosmic vessels are like spaceships, and the demon explains they're ships capable of traversing the infinite expanses of the multiverse. Hyped, the young man asks if they'll build ships for them, but Ogres cuts him off, stating an E-grade shipyard can't build those yet. With a serious look, he warns that first and foremost, they must keep the shipyard safe and hidden. Zachary then asks how to upgrade it and why it needs to be hidden, to which the demon explains that if word gets out, every faction on the planet will try to seize it. Agreeing, the youth says he'll take care of it, and the demon cheers, only to be cut short. With a resolute look, Zach finishes his sentence, saying he'll do it alone. Alone, he walks along the dock of the massive shipyard. As he approaches the main entrance, the doors slide open to welcome him. Stepping inside, the young man introduces himself and asks if he's interrupting anyone. In response, a robot turns around and greets him, introducing himself as Ram, the liaison for the pre-cosmic Iliacs shipyard. The entity then bows, promising to handle any issues or complaints swiftly and fairly. Suddenly, a spider-legged robotic entity pops up, telling the young man not to mind the old goat, and that not all of them are such serious bots. Shocked by the appearance, Zachary is left speechless while the creature asks if he likes its legs, which it considers quite impressive. The robot then reveals it took 300 years and a bit of stolen copper to build this body, which was probably why it got demoted. The robot specialist turns to the newcomer and asks what he intends to build, suggesting powerful weapons to blow up a neighboring island. Faced with the proposal, the young man is left completely speechless and visibly surprised. Soon, Ram interrupts him, reminding him that warships of that scale aren't in the agreement and asking if he even reviewed the pre-approved designs. Then, the contact introduces the other as Karunthel, the master of the shipyard, explaining he was reassigned after disastrous experiments, banning him from blowing up continents. The young man then clarifies he isn't there to build ships, but would like help disguising the shipyard to make it look like an ordinary place. Hearing the request, Karunthel bursts out laughing and asks if the boy is afraid of a little commotion, claiming a bombardment would be much more efficient. The young man remains silent, clearly bothered by the robot's suggestion. Despite the mockery, the specialist agrees he can hide the site's inscriptions, but warns that making everything look uglier will come at a cost. Without hesitation, the boy asks what the price for the service would be. Karunthel starts to name an insanely high price, but is immediately cut off by Ram, who states the correct price of 525,000. With the payment screen before him, he reflects that the price is high, but he has no other choice. Knowing he needs to disguise the place at all costs, the young man confirms the transaction right away. As soon as the payment goes through, Ram informs him that the project will take 4 hours and hopes this is the start of a long collaboration. In an instant, his appearance transforms into a hologram, and the robot asks if that disguise is suitable for the situation. The young man confirms the new look works, while Karunthel grumbles in the background about how boring it all is. Before leaving, Karunthel tells him to call whenever he wants to build things that blow up, warning him not to expect him to return to a bipedal form. Watching him leave, the young man reaches out and asks him to wait a moment. The other stops, and the young man asks if he'd be able to build something to help against a horde of monsters. At that, the specialist sighs, explaining he is restricted in what he can build, and that for now only naval work is permitted. With nothing left to say, the robot turns around and continues his way out of the area. Soon, the boy looks at the now disguised shipyard, with various machines and workers in full operation. As he walks, he notices the large number of disguised creators at work, and wonders how many of them are there. With his goal complete, the young man moves away from the shipyard, taking a path through nature. Sitting in a chair, he recalls the recommendation to buy defenses, but concludes he needs money first, and the best way to get it is with a furnace. The system displays that the equipment works by feeding raw crystals in one side and retrieving graded crystals from the other. Facing the screen, he confirms the purchase of the item without hesitation. With the equipment acquired, the young man concludes all he needs now is to find someone to buy his crystals. The scene then shifts to space, showing the mothership of the Thayer Consortium, a system-sanctioned merchant faction. Inside the ship, an old portrait of one of the leaders is displayed, while a voice reflects that a 20,000-year era will end under his command. Below the painting, A plaque bearing a motto about greed and honor reinforces the family tradition. Meanwhile, the leader of the consortium laments that his family perfectly understood the first part of the creed about fuel, but ignored the compass. Clenching his fist, he lists the troubles plaguing him, like scandals, betrayals, and the suffocating pressure from the Tsarin clan. In a moment of despair, the man says that not even 100 years would be enough to reverse the situation, and he doesn't even have one. He then explains that as soon as they lose their last branch, the system will revoke their trade access license, leaving them backed into a corner. The result, according to him, will be death, as the Tsarin clan won't hesitate to slaughter his people once their trade protections disappear. Even after trying everything with irresistible offers, he vents that simply nobody wants them around. With a bitter laugh, the leader of the consortium finds the whole situation almost comical. He continues his lament, saying that between Elder Tsarin's schemes and his own terrible reputation, he can't even pay someone to take a branch off his hands. Faced with the situation, he sighs, realizing he has only 3 days until the last branch is declared defunct and he has to flee for his life. In his office, the man admits to himself that he lacks the instincts of his ancestors. Even so, looking at the portrait on the wall, he asserts that he still has one last move left, and he intends to play it. Far from there, the young man begins operating his new furnace, pouring in the raw crystals he gathered. Soon the machine kicks into gear and begins processing all the material. Next, the equipment spits out the crystals, now refined and ready for sale. The young man then interacts with the system interface to analyze the final result. Suddenly, a system notification pops up, leaving him stunned as it announces that the headquarters of the Thayer Consortium is available for purchase as a store. The camera zooms out, revealing his isolated campsite in the middle of the forest at night. Looking at the same screen, Ogres analyzes the situation and considers it very interesting. The young man then questions the offer, unable to think of an honest reason why a merchant company would want to move to a place like this. At that, the other reassures him, explaining that the system imposes strict restrictions and that he'd be safe even if a seller were a powerful demon in disguise. Hearing this, the young man realizes it's a massive opportunity and that the space they require wouldn't be an issue. Ogres confirms they are merchants, but warns that something is off, suspecting they are likely running from something. He continues his breakdown, explaining that new worlds make excellent hideouts, and if the boy accepts, he'll end up with a bunch of refugees instead of well-stocked traders. The boy then sarcastically asks if they'd be something like Ogres himself, leaving him speechless. After composing himself, he corrects him, saying they'd be like them, and points out that since they're on the run, their inventory will likely be bottom tier. Given that, the other explains they might not be able to supply special items, leading the young man to ask what he should do. Without hesitation, Ogres enthusiastically replies that he should obviously acquire the headquarters. With a sly look, he explains that the newcomers are desperate, meaning they'll be at a huge disadvantage in the negotiation. The young man listens with apprehension as the demon adds that he'll basically be their only customer. With a menacing grin, Ogres concludes that they can easily drive them into bankruptcy if they refuse to cooperate. As he walks through the forest, the young man wonders where Ogres is. He remembers the demon set up the meeting around here and expects to run into him at any moment. Suddenly, he stops as he hears the sound of multiple voices approaching. Realizing Ogres isn't alone, he prepares for what he believes to be an ambush. Up ahead, the demon rushes a group of people, warning them that they're late. Hidden in a tree, the young man watches one of the civilians complain about a headache, but Ogres coldly orders him to pick up the pace. Without hesitation, he leaps from his hiding spot to attack the demon from above. Caught off guard, Ogres turns around with a furious look, completely bewildered. The young man's attack collides with the demon's defense, triggering a massive blast of energy. Knocked back by the force of the blow, the demon shouts and asks what his problem is. The young man simply replies that when you're ambushed, it's always better to strike first. Utterly confused, Ogres asks what kind of ambush he would pull with a bunch of civilians. Behind him, the group of demons, including young Zacharith, watches the scene in absolute terror. Taking a closer look at the people, the young man repeats the word civilians, now visibly confused. Hiding behind someone else, the boy with glasses peeks out with a look of pure dread. The young man asks what's going on, and Ogres explains that it'll take more than just the two of them to build a real town. Stepping closer, the demon explains that to avoid infrastructure issues, this group will help build a city that can actually expand. With an awkward smile, the young man apologizes for the attack, admitting he thought the demon was there to kill him. He then turns to the group and formally introduces himself as Zack. The other demons remain silent, silently observing the interaction between the two. Moments later, Ogres claps his hands and orders everyone to stop staring and get to work. Immediately, one of the newcomers starts setting up a meeting table. Once the table is ready, they unroll a map of the area for everyone to see. They quickly improvise a covered shelter to begin planning. Gathered with the group, Ogres announces it's time to discuss construction and asks Zack what name he picked for the town. Taken by surprise, the young man hesitates for a second before suggesting Port Atwood. The demon then instructs the group to start planning, reminding everyone that the place needs to be defensible in 40 days. The team immediately starts brainstorming, throwing out ideas for the merchant district, plumbing, and foot traffic. Watching them work, the young man realizes Ogres was right and admits to himself that he has no clue how to build a city. The final blueprint divides the city into 4 zones, with the innermost walled off exclusively for Zack, extending to shield the shipyard all the way to the ocean. The main goal of the inner zone is to keep any other demon from discovering his secret. Outside, the other 3 zones are laid out, one for trade and craftsmen, another for a military camp, and the last for residential housing. Studying the map, Zack points to a detail and asks what it is, but one of the demons tries to hush him. Just then, one of the women steps up and explains it's the site for an academy, leaving the young man confused. She confirms it, emphasizing that an academy is a cornerstone for any faction, since a society that fails to prepare its youth is doomed to fall. Hearing this, the young man asks how old the students would be and what they'd be learning. Ogres clarifies that while the system only allows cultivation to start at 16, academies prepare kids long before that. The woman adds that the institution teaches everything from physical combat and cosmic energy control to crafting items. The young man then asks if that's why every demon he fought had such similar classes and skills. The female demon explains that it's called a heritage. Sitting down, Ogres elaborates, stating that paths to power are closely guarded secrets, and most clans build their foundations on just a few. He uses his own bloodline's path as an example, the same one Rydell followed, prompting Zack to ask how cultivation fits into all this. The woman explains that cultivation accelerates leveling and evolves one's race, which is essential for class advancement. The young man asks if a mortal could ever become a cultivator, and she admits that while possible, she isn't sure how. With a smirk, Ogres cuts in and claims there are treasures capable of doing just that. He tells a story about an ancient Hemin who went to war with a planet's ruling family just to get a treasure that would turn his beloved pet into a divine beast. Intrigued, the young man tilts his head and asks how the story ended. Ogres explains that the He-Man wiped out the entire planet, took the treasure, and successfully turned his pet into the creature he wanted. Visibly shocked, the young man asks if that's where the story ends. With a sly grin, the demon says it's far from over. He goes on to reveal that the beast turned into a beautiful woman, whom the Hemin fell in love with, but she didn't return his feelings. With a grim look, Ogres wraps up the story, saying that in the end, the man was killed by his own pet. He suddenly claps his hands, ending the topic and stating it's finally time for Zack to buy the merchant. The two walk together across a green field toward the transaction site. When they arrive, the demon turns to the young man and tells him to make the purchase. Without delay, the system interface pops up, and he confirms the purchase of the Thayer X Consortium headquarters. Instantly, a pillar of blue energy shoots down from the sky, materializing the building on the spot. Standing before them is an ancient, run-down mansion in the middle of the field. Ogres remarks that the place is a bit run-down, mockingly suggesting Zack might have just hired the worst merchants in the multiverse. Even so, the two approach the front door of the old structure. Suddenly, the door swings open, and a cheerful voice welcomes them as honored customers. A short, blue-skinned man introduces himself as Calrin Thayer, president of the consortium, and asks which of them is the distinguished lord. During the negotiations, Calrin slams his hand on the table, calling the proposal absurd and outrageous. He refuses to pay 54 coins per crystal, calling the price highway robbery, but Ogres threatens him to stop acting like a down-on-his-luck businessman. Outraged, the merchant shouts that it's not an act, but complete absurdity. He then approaches the young man and grabs his wrist to catch his attention. With a pained expression, he asks if it looks like an act, claiming his children haven't eaten in weeks. For a moment, the demon seems to reconsider, visibly affected by the scene. However, he soon bursts out laughing and warns that if Calrin keeps trying to trick him, his kids will go hungry for much longer. Zack then reminds him that he's lucky to have anyone to negotiate with at all, and that he could just wait for his bankruptcy and put his kids to work in the mines. Facing a deadlock, Ogres makes a new offer of 52 coins per crystal. The The merchant sighs and admits that while the consortium has seen better days, he can't accept that price. With a dramatic performance, he makes a counteroffer, proposing a generous price of 35. The offer leaves the demon incredulous and visibly irritated. Furious, Ogres begins to insult the blue-skinned man, who refuses to be intimidated. Calren slams the table again and shouts at him to listen. Beside himself, the merchant accuses Ogres of being a scheming demon, claiming the Lord would have accepted his offer if not for him, to which the demon replies that he would be robbing a blind man. Watching the argument, Zack thinks he's glad he isn't the one being scammed, though he could do without the insults. In a fit of rage, Ogres asks for a whip to show the gnome how a real demon negotiates. In response, Calren asks for a gallows, declaring he'd rather hang himself than suffer such injustice. The negotiation then devolves into a chaotic shouting match, with the two facing off in the middle of the camp. Exhausted after the fight, the young man finally proposes 47, and the merchant accepts the deal. Relieved, the youth sighs and gives thanks that it's finally over. With the deal closed, Ogres orders his men to gather the crystals and set up more mining teams, as it's finally time to get paid. Still recovering, Calren orders his staff to prepare the accountants and Nexus coins. Soon, both groups hurry to carry out their leader's orders. Amid the hustle and bustle, Zack approaches with a large sack, announcing that the first shipment of crystals is ready. Inspecting the contents, the merchant calculates that the 11,000 crystals total 517,000 coins. As the exchange is prepared, the two children the man mentioned walk by. Seeing them, the demon turns and calls out to the little ones. He walks over and offers a bit of food to each of them. Afterward, Ogres asks them not to tell anyone what he did, as he doesn't want people thinking he's soft. 3 days later, the sound of hard work echoes from inside a mountain mine. With his pickaxe, the young man breaks through rock in search of more crystals. After a while, he pauses for a moment to wipe away his sweat and catch his breath. Inside the cave, the young man comments that he's heard many explanations about the system, but still doesn't know what it actually is, to which the woman replies she was wondering when he'd ask. She then says she'll tell him, but first he needs to know about an ancient empire from a time before the system existed. In that distant era, cultivators sought immortality on their own, without any guidance. The female demon explains that during this period, an immensely powerful empire, led by a man known as the Boundless Emperor, ruled the cultivation world for millennia. This emperor had reached the peak of power and, with his limitless ambition, decided to turn all of creation into his personal empire. This sparked a war that lasted for millions of years, to the point where even the great empire's strength began to wane. The woman relates that they were running out of soldiers to keep fighting. Facing this crisis, the emperor and his generals came up with a bold solution, a system that would connect to all cultivators to train them. To achieve this, billions of the ancient empire's strongest cultivators gathered to infuse creation with their energy. They then tethered the artifact to the heavenly Tao itself, and its activation was a success. Curious, the young man asks what the cosmic entity's first words were. The woman then reveals that the system's first 2 words were insufficient energy. She explains that what followed were the Dark Ages, as something went horribly wrong with creation, and it began to forcibly absorb energy. She continues, saying that every cultivator who helped activate the system was absorbed and killed, and the entity proceeded to consume all ambient energy in the universe. Because of this, progress in cultivation became nearly impossible, and the boundless emperor was slain, remembered only as the sinner who plunged the universe into darkness. Everything changed, however, when energy returned to the universe and the system spoke for the second time, announcing that initialization was complete. The female demon recounts that the system then opened the path of cultivation and began training warriors, restricting and categorizing the Tao itself. The old methods of meridian cultivation were abandoned, replaced by stages of empowerment. She reveals that this usurpation of the Tao is why some factions call the system the Cosmic Guardian, believing it blocked new paths. Zack then questions why the system integrated Earth if it was meant to be just a training tool for the ancient empire. The woman smiles, shaking her head, and explains that Earth doesn't even belong to the same universe. She clarifies that while the system fulfilled its purpose of training warriors, it also inherited the Emperor's ambition and has continued to expand ever since. The young man asks how things like merchants and monsters factor into it, given that the system was designed only for cultivators. The female demon confirms that initially, only cultivators were connected, but the system underwent numerous changes throughout its history. To understand these changes, she states they need to talk about the apostates, figures who managed to bend the laws of the multiverse to their will. She begins by explaining that very little is known about the first apostate, not even his name. Amid the silence of the cave, the woman reveals he is known only as the First Defier,